尊敬的各位来宾，大会将在5分钟后开始，请您尽快就座，并将手机等通讯设备置于静音状态。谢谢合作。Distinguished guests, our conference will start in 5 minutes. Please be seated and mute your mobile phones and other electronic devices. Thank you for your cooperation. 尊敬的来宾，请注意置于座椅上的同传设备。频道1为中文频道，频道2为英语频道。如果同传设备故障，请到位于会场后方的同传设备更换处更换。会议结束后，请将同传设备放置在座椅上。谢谢。Distinguished guests, there are simultaneous interpretation devices on your seats. Channel 1 is for Chinese and Channel 2 is for English. If you have any problem with the interpretation devices, please ask the staff at the back of the hall for help. At the end of the conference, please leave your interpretation devices on your seats. Thank you very much. 尊敬的各位来宾，大会即将开始，请您尽快就座，并将您的手机等通讯设备置于静音状态。谢谢合作。Distinguished guests, the conference will start soon. Please be seated and set your mobile phones and other communication devices to the silent mode. Thank you for your cooperation.
Okay. Your attention, please. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Beijing and welcome to the Xiangshan Forum. My name is Xie Tao. I'm the Dean of the School of International Relations and Diplomacy at Beijing Foreign Studies University. I'm very honored to be the moderator today for the Young Military Officers and Scholars Forum. And so first, let me extend my warmest welcome to people from China. I think I knew some of the people on the panel, and we met many years ago. And we have we met a few times on our campus at BFSU and other occasions. So it's great to catch up with everybody here. And so for our panel today, it's called Young Military Officers and Scholars Seminar. And I presume this is oriented towards looking at the next generation military leaders and political leaders in China as well as outside China. For those of you who care about international security, care about global development, and so you have to pay attention to next generation leaders, people like who are sitting right now on our panel. And so they will be the future decision makers. They will be the future influencers of the world in geopolitics and in security. And so for the theme of our panel, it's called Approaches to Addressing International Conflicts. As we all know, the world today, as of the moment I'm speaking now, there are major armed conflicts going on in Russia, in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Israel, and in some parts of Africa and in some other parts of Southeast Asia. And so the world is not free from war. The world is not free from hunger, starvation, humanitarian crisis. And so that's why we are gathered here to think about how we can address international conflicts and how we can come up with solutions so that we can make the world a better and a safer world for not our own children, but for the children after our children, right? And so for those of us who are here, we will focus on the three topics. I think that you all got the topics in advance. The first one is, what is the right way to resolve international conflicts? I think all of you may have some answer to this, right? The second question, how to better deliver the mandate of the United Nations in maintaining international peace and security. As we know, the UN is the most important multilateral international security organization. It has, I would say, the largest source of legitimacy across the world. And so how we can better deliver the mandate of the UN. The third question is, how do we leverage the positive role of major countries such as China, the United States, and other major countries around the world in resolving international conflicts? So these are the three questions, and we are going to have discussions around the three questions. We have 7 speakers, very distinguished young scholars and military officers around the world. So let me take a few minutes to introduce them, and then we will start the first round of discussion by giving each speaker 3 minutes for the first round of your opening statement. And after that, these panelists can address each other. You can also have additional comments. And we will go for about 70 minutes before we open up the floor for audience here in our room. I'm pretty sure we have also questions for our next generation military and political leaders. So let me go around the counterclockwise, okay? The gentleman on my right-hand side, Lieutenant Colonel Mr. CHANG. He's an assistant research fellow from the Institute of War Studies at the PLA's Academy of Military Sciences. And then to the right hand of Mr. Xie is Ms. Javaria Tarin. She's the CEO of Baluchistan Institute of Research and Development, Pakistan. And then on the right hand to Ms. Tarin, it's actually not in the right order according to the printed out. It's Mr. Ab. Mr. Ab is Pascal Alexander Ab. He's a senior researcher from the Peace Research Institute, Frankfurt, Germany. And then to the right hand, I have Mr. A is Ms. Sarah Tziniers. I hope I pronounced your name. Okay. Sarah, she's a research fellow at the Department of War Studies at King's College, London. And then we do clockwise. We have Mr. Zhou Yiqi. He's an associate research fellow from the Institute for Public Policy and Innovation Studies at Shanghai Institute of International Studies. And then we have Prinsela Arkor Guji. She's a deputy course director, humanitarian assistance in West Africa courses at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. And last but not least, we have Dmitry Stefanovich. He's a research fellow at the Primakov, the National Research Institute of World Economy and International Relations at the Russian Academy of Sciences. So again, another welcome to all of you. And so thank you for being here. And so now let me start clockwise. We just introduced the people counterclockwise, and now we start clockwise. So why don't we go the first round for 3 minutes. You have a 3-minute opening statement. You can address any one of the questions I just raised. Okay, please.
Okay, that was unexpected, but yeah, I'll do my best. Introductions, and I will try to address like the topics were proposed in a somewhat interconnected way. So clearly, international conflicts are numerous these days, and the world is rapidly changing due to technology, due to politics, due to economy, due to demography. Everything is in flux. But actually, have been with our civilization, with humankind, since the dawn of the ages. This is a sad reality, but also it is good news, because we have developed quite a number of tools to address international conflicts. One can put those tools into kind of two baskets. The first basket would be self-help, and the second would be mutual security. In the first case, the focus is clearly on developing one's own capabilities throughout the whole spectrum, finding strong allies and focusing on deterrence, or even looking for superiority and advantages in selected areas where it is possible. But this leads to a classic case of the so-called security dilemma. Whatever you do to enhance your own security will be perceived as a threat by everyone else. The dilemma is also very old, and but there are also tools to address it. And the best tool here is arms control, in the broadest terms, because arms control is not only those sophisticated treaties that are unfortunately not really numerous these days, but also a number of other options that can be pursued. A period after the previous Cold War was quite prosperous for Europe and some other regions because of arms control, because of arms reductions, because of peace dividend, and, well, lack of real military threats. Unfortunately, the policies, especially the NATO policies, both internal and external, have led to the current crisis. But if we look at, for example, relations between Russia and China, which are probably the best that they have ever been in the history, one of the foundations, one of the bricks in this foundation is arms control, because there are several proper arms control treaties between Russia and China, and there are people in both countries who might be not really happy about those treaties, but still they do work, and they are one of the reasons why current relations are good rather than bad. Of course, before achieving any progress, we need to stop the regress, to reverse the current trends. Okay, I'm fine with that.
What did you finish up?
Well, I just once again reiterate that arms control is a good tool, not only for international security, but for national security as well.
Okay, so I'll stick very strictly with a 3-minute opening statement, and then you can come up in the follow-up later. And so let me summarize my Dimitrov is like, number one, self-help. And John Mearsheimer is not in the room right now. I think that he would be very happy to hear what you say. Every country should be on your own help, right? Maximize your security. Second, he mentioned about arms control. And he used China, Russia as an example, how the two countries manage their conflicts through arms control. So thank you. So now let's move on to our next speaker, Princella.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll try to be as brief as possible. First of all, I think that resolving international conflict cannot be done. There's no right or wrong way to resolve international conflict. I'm saying this because I believe that there is what I term adaptive to context. That is supposed to say every conflict should have its own strategy. So for one conflict, perhaps dialogue and mediation could work, but then in other cases, you should adopt other strategies. It could be two at a time, say putting together peace building and then humanitarian assistance. And this could work because different strategies could influence certain parts of the conflict, different facets of the conflict at a time. So I'll give an example of a conflict resolution strategy we used in West Africa, where I come from. This was in 2010. Ghana, the Republic of Ghana, which is the country I come from, had disputes with our neighbors to the west, that's the Republic of La Côte d'Ivoire, concerning the delimitation of maritime boundary in the Gulf of Guinea on the Atlantic Ocean. Because at that time there had been new discoveries of concessions of oil in that zone. So it took a period of up to 5 years of bilateral discussions with our neighbors to resolve this to no avail. And ultimately Ghana initiated proceedings against Côte d'Ivoire at the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea to settle this ongoing dispute. In December 2014, Ivory Coast agreed, accepted, and then both countries mutually agreed to submit the dispute to a special chamber of this tribunal. So within a period of 3 years, the tribunal came up with a statement taking into account of the claims by both countries and eventually ruled in favor of Ghana concerning the maritime delimitation or limited boundary claims made by Ghana. I'm saying this because it means that for this solution, arbitration worked for Ghana and then Ivory Coast, because I'd say that after that, despite this dispute, there's still better cooperation among these countries, and it did not lead to any disruption in the cooperations of these two countries. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so Princella mentioned about that there's no right or wrong way to resolve a conflict. And so she gave the example of the maritime dispute between her own country, Ghana, and Côte d'Ivoire, about their maritime disputes, right? And she said eventually this was resolved through arbitration and adjudication by an international tribunal. I think you are implying some of the maritime disputes around the borders of China. I think you are implying. So let's see. Maybe you will say more on this. Okay. So now our third speaker, Mr. Zhou Yuqi.
Thank you, Professor Xie, and my great honor to have to be here and share some of my thoughts of those very great questions. As for the one on the resolution of the international conflict, first we must admit that current international conflict have all very deeply rooted structural reasons which cannot be solved in one day or one night. But still, I would say there are still several channels for us to at least address the immediate threat of the international conflict. I will summarize all those channels into the several words starting with the character of the D. The first is the de-escalation, because currently, one adverse effect of the current international conflict is its spillover and increasingly strong spillover impact to the global economy, and also we say the global stabilities. Like for example, the Ukraine conflict have some impact for the food crisis in Africa, and the Gaza war has also some effect to the supply chain through the Red Sea. Therefore, I think all the countries, especially the major powers in the international organizations, should work on something to de-escalate and to manage the spillover of the international conflict. The second is diplomacy. Nowadays, there also seems to be an increasingly dangerous trend, which some countries think that the military solutions could be a shortcut to very complicated conflict. However, military cannot solve all those very complicated issues. It can even make all those issues even more complicated. Therefore, we still need to reprioritize the role of diplomacy in all those conflict solutions, whether it's conflict mediation, or there was arbitration, just mentioned by our previous speakers, or like even some kind of role of the confidence building mechanisms. I think all those, the role of diplomacy can play we should give a much more important role to diplomacy to foster dialogue, build trust, and to create some positive environment for the final resolution of those conflicts. I will first stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Yichi. So I think maybe I can say you are saying like all conflicts are not created equal. So we have to contextualize every conflict. There are historical contexts, there are maybe economic, maybe political, cultural reasons, and then you suggested de-escalation, diplomacy. We should prioritize diplomacy, de-escalation over coercion or force. All right. So thank you. So let me move on to our next speaker. Sorry. I don't know why this keeps. Sorry. Sarah, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm honoured to be here and also to have the opportunity to speak to you today. So I'm going to reiterate some of the comments that I already made, but this time doubling down on the role of communication and dialogue. Wars have been around throughout civilization, but whether they've been a hot war or a cold war, they've always ended with communication and dialogue. So for the purposes of the talk today, focus on approaches to addressing international conflicts. I'm going to take as my inspiration a research project that I conducted last year with a couple of my colleagues from War Studies, King's College London. And what we did is we looked at Chinese views on AUKUS. AUKUS is the trilateral military technology partnership between the United States, Australia and the United Kingdom. And it's been very controversial. But what we found is that although there's a huge amount of commentary on AUKUS in the West, the majority of it is being produced by Western scholars or policy analysts or the media. And there's actually very little known in the West about Chinese views on AUKUS. And it seems such a kind of strange position that we're in, where we don't really understand what people in China think, what policymakers think. So this research project, we employed a Mandarin translator, and she was able to translate a number of texts produced by various different sources in China. And with that information, we were able to kind of broadly categorise the kind of concerns that China has into 4 categories. categories. And I'm not going to go into that now. I'm happy to answer questions on that later. Those concerns are really real and really valid. So, for instance, China's concerned about nuclear non-proliferation, which is proliferation within the AUKUS partnership. That's a really real concern because you've got weapons-grade uranium being used in the reactors that are fueling the nuclear-powered submarines. So we conducted this research, but we also came up with 3 practical solutions, and these are: and they were able to really make huge amounts of progress by being a neutral country. Israelis, Palestinians and American officials travelled to Oslo in Norway to have these really, free, frank, open, transparent conversations, but behind closed doors. And that was really a really kind of positive. Sorry, have I gone over? Yeah, I'll do. Is that the end of the 3 minutes? Sorry. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Gosh, I've gone quick. Okay, I'll quickly the other 2. So strategic balancing. And then the third one is kind of like a strategic dialogue, so such as the US-China strategic economic dialogue, which was unfortunately abandoned under the Trump administration, but reviving something like that would be really positive.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption about that. Okay, yes. So Sarah mentioned a very nice example of her own research, which emphasizes the impact of effective political communication. In fact, she raised a very important issue for Chinese observers in the room right now. That is how we can better convey Chinese views to Western observers of China. She said, there's so much discussion about AUKUS, but what she heard, at least in London, at King's College London, is mostly Western voices. And she would like to hear more about Chinese views on AUKUS. Right? And so this is a challenge, a task for Chinese scholars and analysts in the room. Okay. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So our next speaker is Pascal, please. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Tao, and also, of course, the organizers of this forum for inviting me to speak here. Since we were asked about the role of the UN, and I think nobody has tackled that yet, I'm just going to take my 3 minutes and cover that topic. And for this, I think it's useful to take a walk down memory lane. Back to a time when we also saw a similar situation of great powers at loggerheads and conflicts intensifying around the world. And the time I'm talking about, of course, are the relatively hot phases of the Cold War. So back then, the United Nations was not able to actually implement its mandate of working towards peace and security globally, simply because the elite gremium, the United Nations Security Council, included the rival superpowers. And they basically, because they were viewing the world as a chessboard in which one side's advantage would always be to the other side's disadvantage, they often blocked actions which they perceived as being slightly disadvantageous for one of their sides. And this is unfortunately a situation which we also have now. When you look at the Ukraine war, then of course one of the belligerents, the aggressor state, Russia, sits in the United States Security Council as a permanent member. When you look at the Gaza war, Israel is very, very closely aligned with the United States, and the United States has a habit of blocking UN resolutions that are critical of Israeli behavior. And the list of conflicts that we've already talked about, of course, goes on, and great powers, by virtue of their being great powers, will always have a distinct interest in them. So I think the right way to start, actually, is to take up the calls for UN reform that, of course, long predate the current period of conflict, but are focused on 2 points. One of them, the more important one, arguably, is the abolition of the veto of the permanent members of the Security Council. This is what is urgently needed to prevent a blockade of this gremium. And the other one is to achieve a more democratic or representative setup in this gremium, which means that it should be enlarged, it should include UN Peace and Security Agency is actually taking place. And it should also include new rising powers that, when the UN was first founded, were still colonial territories, but nowadays are occupying a much, much greater role in world politics and should also be encouraged to play a constructive role inside the UN. That is pretty much all about the UN. Since I've got about 40 seconds left on my count, I can also very quickly talk that the UN has another use of being an arena, I think, in which we could see a positive competition between great powers. A competition for delivering peace as a public good, like development, for example, already is, and in which it would be useful to have different approaches to peace building, for example, contending with each other. For example, providing mediation, providing development aid in war-torn societies, providing peacekeeping forces, of course. So if we see this global quest for leadership as one in which it is necessary to convince other states of the positive agency of a country, then I think this would also be a productive way in which to channel the current tensions that we're seeing between great powers. Thank you very much.
Great, you are very well timed. So Mr. Ad proposed a few things about UN reform. I thank you for bringing up this very crucial topic. Chinese leaders and Chinese scholars have mentioned about the urgency of reforming the UN system. And you mentioned a few, for example, the enlargement of the UN system, the UN Security Council, and how we can prevent some countries from frequently exercising their veto, paralyzing the UN Security Council. Right? So I think you probably have more to add to what you just said. Maybe some questions from the audience. Okay. So let's move on to our next speaker, Ms. Javier Terrain. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much for inviting me here. The topic is very interesting, international conflict, and I just thought of it. We all know what conflict is. It started when I was a child and I wanted to ride my brother's bicycle, and he always used to push me back to the home, and he wanted me to be at home to wash the dishes or just do house help with my mother. But I always wanted to ride a bike, then I wanted to ride a car, and then I wanted to be out. So he always used to use his influence. But thank God, at my home, I had a parents, and then to control my parents, because, you know, father and mother, they are usually get influenced by a son. I had a grandmother, and she used to control my parents and their influence on me. So what I feel here, that in this world, we know about what conflict is, you know, how the Western powers want to influence the countries which don't have power, which don't have influence, which don't have resources. So who will control them? So I believe here we are missing a grandma. And who that grandma could be? It could be the countries like China, it could be a countries like Russia, because the three other countries which has more influence on the world, like UK, United States, and other country, Russia. So I feel that US, UK, France, they have failed the world. Now we are looking towards China and Russia. So they have to play their important role in it. They need to be very vocal about it. But the question is, are they willing to accept a role of a grandma or not? So, you know, I'm more interested toward that, because coming from Pakistan and seeing the conflict from my own eyes, I believe that, you know, we really need to come up and we really need to do more about it, because it's all about controlling the resources of the countries. Why the conflict start? Because, you know, the great powers are interested in the resources, like what's happening in Africa, what was happening in Afghanistan, what was happening in Pakistan. So we really need to control that influence. We really need to control that power, because I feel and I believe that we are no more living in a world which need to get influenced by the power. This world should get influenced by the mutual respect and leadership. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Another very well-timed speech. So you have just proposed a new theory, a grandma theory of international relations, right? And so you are actually looking for somebody who can patrol, who can discipline the world. And you take two countries to task, like China and Russia. Are they willing to take on the responsibilities of patrolling the world, right? Contributing to international security and development? So, last but not least, Mr. Xie.
Thank you, Professor. It is a luck for me to be the last speaker, so I have learned a lot from ladies and gentlemen. I think to address international conflicts is such a challenge, and to answer this question in 3 minutes is much more challenging. So I will use 3 minutes, 3 keywords to help me to illustrate my point of view: prevention, mediation, and innovation. First is prevention. I think the cost and the difficulty of preventing a potential crisis is much less than stopping an ongoing one, let alone the cost of post-war reconstruction. And the conflicts do not break out all of a sudden. It is usually goes through a spiral escalation of crisis. So the priority to prevent a conflict is to prevent a vicious circle by addressing the security concerns of all parties and stabilizing the situation. But conflict prevention does not mean that the interest of all parties be met, because it is impossible. It is meant to avoid the worst case scenario. So the second keyword is mediation. No matter how much we wish to avoid conflict, it is difficult for us to avoid conflict completely. History has proven that conflicts can only be resolved through negotiations, and an early ceasefire and an end to war is the only options for saving more lives and making peace. Third is innovation. I think international conflict is just like the cancer of the world peace. But there is no once and for all medicine or quick fix. It needs not only a case-by-case response, but it also needs a universal prevention mechanism. So according to the law of unity of opposites in Chinese, 事物的对立统一原理, there are probability of the transformation between conflict and cooperation. But the challenge is how to identify, weaken, or even eliminate the factors that may lead to international conflicts, and at the same time to create more opportunities and conditions for cooperations. Professor, can you give me some more minutes for me to respond to the question about AUKUS? Okay, I will. About the AUKUS, so from my point of view, UK, US, and Australia are all sovereign states. They decide to further promote their cooperations in security cooperation. It's okay for China. But what China are concerned and other countries in the Asia-Pacific region are concerned are as follows. First, I think is the proliferation of nuclear. So I think under the AUKUS security structure, UK and the US will provide nuclear submarines to Australia in the next few years. So how can AUKUS make sure that what he is doing does not violate the non-proliferation of nuclear? And the second, I think, no matter what AUKUS will do and what AUKUS is doing, I think it will not make sure that it will not harm the regional security, and it will not harm the interest of China and other countries in the Asia-Pacific region. What we are concerned is not only about what AUKUS is saying, but also about what AUKUS is doing and what AUKUS will do in the future. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. I don't want to be accused of practicing favoritism towards, a Chinese military officer, but you overspent about 45 seconds. Okay. And so, Sarah, you are looking for a Chinese voice on AUKUS, right? Now you have heard one Chinese voice. Do you want to respond to what Mr. Xie just said?
Sure. Okay. When we did this research project last year, we categorized the concerns that China has into 5 categories. So I'll read those out to you, and then if you want to reflect on those, that'd be really interesting for me. So firstly is the, as you said, the threat of nuclear proliferation. I think that can actually be categorized in 2 subcategories. So firstly, just the the actual possibility of the nuclear materials being leaving Australia and going elsewhere, or being used potentially in Australia for a nuclear weapon. And secondly, it's also the precedent that it sets for in the IEA safeguards agreement. So in terms of, it's called a naval loophole, and it could just set off a kind of stream of other countries wanting to obtain HEU weapons-grade material for things like naval propulsion. The second concern that we observed is this concept of containment. Thirdly, that the world is going to be split even more so into geopolitical blocks, and that could also potentially lead to China's alienation. Fourthly, a new Cold War. And fifth, regional arms racing, or the security spiral. So those are the 5 concerns that we saw when we did this analysis of text. That, as I said, these concerns are not really well known outside. Well, certainly not in the West. They're not really well known. And so the point of doing this project was to be able to understand better what Chinese concerns are, because obviously some of those are absolutely real and valid. And be able to communicate that to decision makers in the West. Thank you.
May I have to finger on this issue, because just maybe some people are not aware about this, but last year Chinese Arms Control and Disarmament Association, jointly with one of the Russian think tanks, authored a huge report on AUKUS, which was presented at the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Preparatory Committee. And it's like, I can send you the link, it's a huge paper with all the topics that were just covered by Chinese and Russian experts.
Mr. Zhou, do you want to respond to what Sarah just said?
Yes, I think actually this is not only a response, but also some of the comments on the third issue, how the major power can play the role. I think whether it's AUKUS or some other, the current so-called the security mechanism built by the West, I think for the West, there needs to be an innovation of the understanding of the security. So far, I think in China's global security initiatives, we have already talked about the new security concept, like common security, cooperative security. But I would say for many Western countries, still, or the many decision makers in the Western countries are still, I would say, things in the Cold War mentalities, like bloc confrontation, or the idea of the so-called deterrence, or the containment. But the issue is, even though maybe some may claim that the coalition building like AUKUS is said to be a so-called defensive coalition, but according to the international relations theory, the concept of the security dilemma will also create a spiral relationship, that a certain kind of even claimed defensive coalition will be perceived by the others as a threat to its sovereignty, the national security. And certainly there has to be some response. And that kind of response will also accelerate this type of the vicious circle of escalation of the security dilemma. So I think certainly, for most of the major powers in the world, certainly we need to update. I would say major power is maybe more like a root kind of solution, which is to update its understandings of what security is and what is the best way to defend its own security.
So maybe I can jump in with a few words. Mr. Zhou just said is that, to borrow from a very famous English saying, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, right? What is your security might be my insecurity. And so you think that, I'm trying to defend my own right of survival. Whereas in the eyes of other countries, you are actually trying to, create chaos, create insecurity for other people. And so he mentioned about the two countries, Australia, the UK, and the United States, right? And so two of them actually are members of the P5, permanent members of the UN. And so Mr. Ab just mentioned about, the reform of the UN. Could you add a few words to this discussion? That is, what is the role of major powers in, making the world a safer place instead of going back to this block confrontation? Mm-hmm.
Sure. I mean, again, it's about avoiding to repeat the mistakes which were made during the Cold War, when I think two blocs viewed each other as implacable enemies, when it would not have been necessary for it to be so, when peaceful coexistence would have also been an option. So that word that might sound unrealistic if we look at the state of the world right now. But I think, for example, by having venues like this one, by having international discussions about what global security challenges are and how to best resolve them, this is maybe perhaps already a first step towards doing so jointly and not falling back into this pattern of containing alliances, where, again, the major problem is that, as Ichi pointed out, if you see security as something that is organized competitively, then you will always have the danger of setting out a spiral that leaves everybody less secure in the end. And this is also why I think the UN is the appropriate venue to talk about truly global security. Because it's the only international body that exists in the world that is, at least in its spirit, free of this kind of character of great power competition, and not an institution that is designed around giving an advantage to, for example, the power that founded it, or that is the leading power inside it. So this, of course, again, has the one important exception of the UN Security Council, which basically enshrines the power structure that was in place at the end of the Second World War, which is now a very long time ago, and of course, therefore, again, is in dire need of reform.
Okay, so
I have a question for Priscilla. Do I have a technician here?
Hello? Yeah, okay. So, Priscilla, I just want to bring this back to your turf. You mentioned about how Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, they successfully adjudicated what are the lessons that you draw from this maritime dispute resolution success? You look around the world, there are so many maritime disputes, right? So take UK and Argentina. They went to war in 1986 over the islands, right? And then there are many other outstanding maritime disputes. So what make the case of Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire so successful? And what lessons other countries can learn from this success?
I can simply say it's political will, and will of everybody, all citizens involved, because as we say, we can't live exclusive of conflict, but how to resolve them. Resolving them is the best way forward. And sometimes conflicts in themselves are not so bad, because they bring about positive change. So I'll say that, first of all, having the will to solve it and continue the peaceful relationship with your neighbor or the opposing party is very important. So with both countries mutually agreeing on that, you can find a good solution.
Mm-hmm. Did the African Union or any other international organization that also played any significant role in adjudication of this conflict?
No. So this was only a special chamber at the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. And then this members of the special chamber were selected by, jointly selected by both countries, members and adjudicators or arbitrators of the chamber were selected by both countries. So it didn't have anything to do with it.
Okay, okay. Thank you. So Tarim mentioned about this grandma theory of IR, and she very explicitly said that U.S., U.K., and France, they seem to be unwilling to exercise, leadership, and so she mentioned about Russia and China taking on more responsibility, right? So we do have, somebody from France. Could you show us how Russia's international security? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I hope nothing will be broken on my side, but yeah, we have a new okay. Successful. Okay.
Maybe you use one.
Yeah, let's switch to this one. Actually, I would like first to react on the ideas about UN Security Council, because while Russia and Russian expert community and even Russian officials agree that there should be like a broadening of the UN Security Council and greater representation of different countries, depraving permanent members of veto is a path to nowhere. It is a path to destruction of the whole system, unfortunately. That's like the perception. But what role can Russia play? Well, there are different ways how Russia can enhance global security and prevent armed conflicts. We have concept of Eurasian security being under development. Russia also provided a blueprint of some sort of security for the Persian Gulf. And well, we have a huge experience in multilateral mechanisms of security and also in terms of foreign security assistance. There is no lack of expertise. The problem is that unfortunately right now, despite all the good words, good ideas that sometimes are being said from different capitals, we are actually entered a very dramatic phase of the great power competition. Despite everyone saying that this is a bad thing, except probably some US politicians, but we are where we are. And under such circumstances, the most important thing would be, as I've said, to try to reverse the trend first before achieving some progress. And to do that, I believe the only option is to acknowledge concerns of others. Even if you do not agree with them, even if it is painful to put one's shoes on your feet, you need to acknowledge that country A have legitimate security concerns, country B have legitimate security concerns, and they need to be addressed. Because, especially over the last decade or so, there were too many cases when Russia had concerns about some of the US military programs. US issues. And in most of these cases, the reaction was like, you shouldn't be concerned about it, it's not about you, it's something else, it's not an issue. And that's all. This is, I still can't understand how people, sane people, decision makers, could have said things like this on the record. Because, well, if your partner or adversary, use any word you want, a nuclear armed adversary has concerns, has security concerns, you need to walk an extra mile to address those concerns, not simply brush them away. So yes, this would be my final comment for now. Like, to achieve any progress, you need to acknowledge that the concerns are legitimate. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to throw the question back to you, Tarim. You mentioned about grandma, right? Because we understand in every culture, grandma means she commands respect, she commands legitimacy, she commands authority. And so in international relations, you talk about China and Russia. In what ways, in your view, that these two countries can display or enhance their authority and legitimacy in international relations?
Well, I believe that Russia and China already have this Shanghai Corporation. So that could be used to influence the Western world, because there are countries like Pakistan is also part of it. You know, if you see the major conflict which has happened since last few decades, they've been happening in, you know, Muslim countries. And when I see the UN Security Council, I do not see any Muslim country representing. Muslims are 1.8 billion people on the earth, but we could not see that, despite, like, we do get, like, you know, membership, but we do not have as strong say. So Shanghai Corporation has a very, very big role, and I believe they need to come forward. And you know, why we still have 9 members, we should have more countries to be involved in the SCU, and they should come forward. They should be, like, you know, because what I feel that UN is has a larger structure, it has more respect in the world, but coming from a UN family, like I was working in UNHCR for 6 years, I worked in EU, I worked in Amnesty International in US. But I could see, even when the UN work in the countries like Pakistan, they more rely on the country, they more rely on the politicians, they more rely on the bureaucracy of that country. So it's again a puppet, you know, the strings are in the hands of world powers. Like last time I remember in the same forum, I met one of the individual, and I was just discussing with him that, you know, how countries like UN can say no to US, can say no to UK, can say no to any other Western world, when the majority of the funding is coming from those countries. So definitely, if you are getting a money from somewhere and you could not raise questions, you don't have that authority. So UN has lost that authority. We had ICC, despite giving arrest warrants to Netanyahu, but that's not happening. Then on the other hand, the Western countries like US is protesting and talking about why Richard has not been arrested or detained. So there is a very open democracy we could see on its finest coming from the Western world. Thank you very much.
尊敬的各位来宾，大会将在5分钟后开始，请您尽快就座，并将手机等通讯设备置于静音状态。谢谢合作。Distinguished guests, our conference will start in 5 minutes. Please be seated and mute your mobile phones and other electronic devices. Thank you for your cooperation. 尊敬的来宾，请注意置于座椅上的同传设备。频道1为中文频道，频道2为英语频道。如果同传设备故障，请到位于会场后方的同传设备更换处更换。会议结束后，请将同传设备放置在座椅上。谢谢。Distinguished guests, there are simultaneous interpretation devices on your seats. Channel 1 is for Chinese and Channel 2 is for English. If you have any problem with the interpretation devices, please ask the staff at the back of the hall for help. At the end of the conference, please leave your interpretation devices on your seats. Thank you very much. 尊敬的各位来宾，大会即将开始，请您尽快就座，并将您的手机等通讯设备置于静音状态。谢谢合作。Distinguished guests, the conference will start soon. Please be seated and set your mobile phones and other communication devices to the silent mode. Thank you for your cooperation.
大会即将开始，请大家尽快就座，并注意会场秩序。谢谢配合。Ladies and gentlemen, leading experts dialogue is about to start. Please take your seats and follow the order. Thank you. 有请主持人主持会议。 嗨，大家好，我是中国人民解放军首位虚拟数字记者木兰，非常高兴与大家见面，很荣幸担任中外名家对话上半场的主持人。本场对话的主题是人工智能安全。上半场共有2位专家做报告，分别是中国清华大学信息科学技术学院院长、中国工程院院士戴琼海，美国前助理国防部长帮办、国防分析研究所研究员施灿德。每位专家的报告时间约为20分钟。Hi everyone, I am Mulan, the first virtual reporter of People's Liberation Army. It's a great pleasure to meet you all. I feel honored to be the host of the first half of Leading Experts Dialogue on the topic of artificial intelligence security. In the first half of the session, 2 experts will give presentations. They are Professor Dai Qionghai, Dean of School of Information Science and Technology at Tsinghua University and academician of the Chinese Academy of Engineering. Mr. Chad Sabraja, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense and research staff member at the Institute for Defense Analysis of United States of America. Each expert will have about 20 minutes for their presentations. 首先有请中国清华大学信息科学技术学院院长戴琼海院士。To begin with, we will have Professor Dai Qionghai, Dean of School of Information Science and Technology at Tsinghua University. Let's welcome him.
各位嘉宾大家好。今天呢，很有幸这个受这个杨院长委托，我们来做个报告，跟大家做一个交流，技术的交流。那这个技术交流呢，最重要是，我们想人工智能技术层面的安全在哪里？所以说做一些思考。第一个，大家可以看到，这个深度学习有这3位创造耳朵。那么他们是纽约大学的，和多伦多大学和蒙特利尔大学3位科学家。当时呢，实际上是在90年代、80年代，那么创造了这种不同的方向，通过卷积神经网络来做这方面的工作给出了深度学习的一个最重要的重量级的这个方法由于这个方法的出现，那么大家可以看到，20年来由于学术界的前沿研究，一直到公司的产业化，产生了什么呢？大模型。那么这个大模型呢，实际上是在文本内容的理解，包括生成图像、视频等方面，那么发挥出了卓越的贡献卓越的贡献。那么也就是说，以大模型为代表的人工智能，也就是在蓬勃的发展。那么这个发展过程中呢，实际上我们在往下走的时候，发现这个大模型应用非常的广泛。那尤其是在 AI for Science 这一块，那么它的贡献非常大。为什么这块能够突破呢？因为科学家们在物理、材料、生物、化学方面呢，积累的数据和正规的这个实验非常的多，因此呢，在大模型在for Science 这块呢，能够很快成为一个领先的这个梯队。所以说在这里面呢，做出了非常卓越的贡献。那么关于其他方面的应用，需要数据来这个领养，那么这样的发展就变得非常的这个要艰难，因为数据量要非常的多。那么这个大模型的这个来历，实际上是以深度学习、深度网络为根的大模型。那么这个深度网络呢，它就存在一个问题。那么大家都知道，现在目前的深度网络是对等的网络，就每个深渊节点它都一样，互相在连接在一起，导致了它们就成了一个什么呀？黑箱。这个黑箱呢，带来的问题什么呀？不可解释，对数据是强依赖，而且是环境这个鲁棒性也差，决策会出现问题。那么这个就给我们技术上带来最大的安全。那么大家可以看到，举了2个例子。第一个呢，我们现在大模型应用在开放场景就比较艰难应用，那么在闭环环境下应用起来比较顺当。那么开放环境就出现问题。那么还有一个，它的决策出现问题。大家可以看下面的一个机器人，它能蹦能跳。当告诉它你把一个物体 放到一个有障碍物的桌子上的时候，大家可以看到，它直接往上怼啊，连桌子带物体全部怼倒了，就是它不会把障碍物拿下来再去割。那么这个问题呢，实际上在国际上命名为什么？莫拉维克悖论啊，就大模型能做的事儿啊，简单的事做不了啊，好像很难的事能做得了，这就给我们导致了一个什么呀？它因为本身不可解释，所以这样的东西存在的，它会经常存在。因此，这种技术的问题，它会带来方方面面的风险。所以说，我们说技术安全，这是一个第一大问题。第二大问题呢，大模型啊需求量非常增大，那么就效率非常低啊，要小型化在端侧应用比较难。还有最重要一个问题是能源问题啊，带来的能源的这个技术的挑战。那么大家可以看我们这个它的翻的过程，你看我们摩尔定律是这个翻的比这个什么呀算力能源的需求要高得多啊，要低得多。这里面大家可以看，我们受训一次就要2.4亿度电，就要训练。因为大家的大模型首先要训练，然后才能做推理啊。推理呢问题呢导致什么呢？它有莫拉维克悖论。训练的呢导致它什么呀？能源消耗很大。因此这是第二个带来的技术问题。因为这两个技术问题带来以后，那么国际上呢也在不断的探索。那么这样的探索呢，为的是解决这两个技术问题。首先一个问题大家可以看到，那么双中的挑战呢，大家可以看到需要什么呀？智能的路径是不是需要改啊？就是这个大模型怎么能够改成更好的用，解决莫拉维克等一些悖论问题。第二个，算力的挑战，我们能不能变啊？能不能改？这两个技术带来的安全问题，那么国际学术界和产业界一直也就在研究。第一个方面的研究，大家可以看到智能的路径应该从哪儿走。那么大家可以看到，我们以前研究的深度网络呀，实际上来自上个世纪50年代的工作，是胡伯研究了什么？猫视觉系统，觉得猫的视觉具有卷积效应，因此1981年获得了诺贝尔奖。说刚才3位图灵奖呢，也是在这个基础上来做的工作。因此呢，那么我们说举一个不恰当例子，就是我们深度网络的这个结构的水平类似猫的智能。如果把大模型推进去以后呢，这个时候就什么呀？类似灵长类的水平。那么如果要达到人类的水平，那势必还要进行深入的研究去讨论，那么这样才能够更好的去解决我们智能的问题。因此我们把这个比例比上以后，我们接下来就要研究什么呀？脑智能，使得能够可解释啊，而且不会产生莫拉维克悖论。那么未来在应用方面呢，才能够解决这些技术的难题。那么第一个问题呢，大家可以看到，我说学术界在研究，美国呢带着阿尔法项目啊，阿尔伯的项目，他呢投资了1亿美金，在2016年。那么有3位科学家领衔做交叉研究，第一位是泰森利 CMU 的教授，做机器学习；第二位是 David Cox 是哈佛大学的，主要做脑成像；第3位是呢 Tolas 是贝勒医学院的，专门做神经处理。他们用这1亿美金呢，要打通计算神经科学和什么呀机器学习算法这个桥梁要打通，实际上目标就是研究脑智能啊。所以说研究脑智能比研究猫的视觉系能更加要高一个层次。那么这个呢，也是采用光学成像，要绘制出一个立方毫米啊，这个10万个神经元它们的互相连接。因为这个互相连接搞成了，那么神经元之间的相互作用就搞成了，那么就不是这种我们深度网络的对等网络，应该是异构网络。那么第二个呢，大家可以看到2017年哥大 UCL 等等高校做了一个什么工作呢？做了一个IBL 的这个实验室，这是分布式实验室，主要做脑决策实验室，就是要解决大模型人工智能现在的算法不能够这个满足我们的愿望，由于技术带来的挑战。那么这个研究呢，主要是也通过生物的行为学基础，通过光学成像研究它的什么呀脑神经环路的构建，然后考虑它的决策行为。这个实验室的研究呢，从实验室光学仪器平台到模式都标准化统一起来，每一个工作的进展都为下一个工作奠定基础，属于成果是 open 的。那么这个工作来做，那么所以说呢，现在就聚焦一个方向，什么方向呢？就要研究神经元的环路，那就看 脑皮层神经元环路怎么连接的，做成什么呀？神经环路。那么就是说，介观的光学成像是一个难题。大家知道，宏观成像有核磁共振、PET、CT， 那么这些成像呢，只能看脑区域，看不到神经元。那么还有一种什么呢？微观成像，只看一个神经元里面物质交互的作用，看不到神经元之间的交互作用。所以说我们说叫中观成像，就是我们所说的介观成像，成为一个世界的难题。那么所以说呢，各个国家的科学家们都希望把这个介观成像能够研究起来。那么在这里面呢，我们构建了一个桥梁。这个桥梁呢，我们就说这边是脑科学，那边是什么呀？人工智能，做一个可解释的人工智能，探讨脑成像机理。这个大家可以看多模态回路观测，有宏观模态、微观模态，还有我们要说的刚才最难的是什么呀？介观模态。那么通过多层次的认知模型的构建，能不能提出一个可解释的这个智能的模型算法？就从脑科学到人工智能，要打通这条路径。那么国际上呢，做了很多的成果，也做了很多方面的研究。那么清华大学呢，也开展了这方面的研究啊。从2012年开始，研究了这么2代的光学显微镜，能够看全脑皮层的神经元。那么这个神经元呢，看到这个100万神经元的互相切换的连接就看到了。这个连接看到了呢，对未来研究就产生一个非常重要的一个工作。那么我们呢，在国际上首次提出了一个第一次43个脑区100万级神经元的连接，把它的行为和它的表情的连接又把它开始做了研究。最重要还是为脑科学到人工智能铺垫一个路径。那么这个是什么呢？我们构建了一个这个模型的特点。那么就小数据，那么低能耗，因为大家知道我们人脑的工作不到30瓦，23瓦就可以工作了。而现在的大模型的工作要求的算力非常大，那么因此在这个上面用小算力能解决脑模型这么一个人工智能的出来，那么是未来人工智能的一个发展方向。其实各个国家都在做这方面的研究，很多产生了很重要的成果。我们重新构建了一个模型，叫什么呀？大模型大数据仍旧存在。那么它训练这种脑模型，训练完了以后呢，变成我们小数据脑模型的特点。那么大家是知道，我们人类随着年龄的增长，随着知识的增多，会什么呀？会记忆力会衰退，衰退了以后呢，就没有办法工作。如果用大模型训练我们的脑智能，这个时候它会记住整个的特点，整个的特征，那它不会说失忆。那么在这里面这个脑模型再开展工作，那么就能够解决我们智能算法的技术安全问题。那么第二个方面呢，我们想讲一讲这个关于算力的挑战，也就是算力的这种技术问题。如果现在我们来做的话，大家可以看到，我们全世界很多国家都建立算力网。算力网呢，基于现在的我们 GPU 的技术来建算力网。那么通过我们看这个调查的数据来看，未来10年，我们呢10天的人工的应用量，相当于中国3峡大坝水电站1年的发电量，这个是非常非常严峻的一件事情。因此呢，10年内大模型消耗我们在中国的电力就要5%到10%，非常大。那么同时呢，这3位大家都知道，奥特曼、黄仁勋这个都知道。那么他们就说，14个地球的能源要消掉，超级 AI 才成为电力的无底洞。所以说，这种技术安全带来的可能性是非常后怕的全世界都需要绿色能源，而这种能源不要浪费掉的话，那非常麻烦。因此要寻求新的路径。新的路径在哪里呢？大家可以看到，有通用芯片，就现在的模式大家在做，还有专用芯片模式在做。那么我们希望讨论一种新型架构的发展新赛道，能够做出新的一个算力的一个前沿的东西，就是降低能耗的东西。那么在这里大家可以看到呢，光计算带来了非常重要的特点。下面3个点大家可以看到，第一个 GPU 算力不高，但是功耗非常的大非常的大。现在目前全世界都在建这种算力。第二个呢，类脑电子计算，它是什么呢？它的功耗很低，但是呢算力也很低。第3个比较有前景的光电智能计算，大家可以在那个点上，算力高了，还有什么呀？功耗降下来了功耗降下来了，它是100万以降。那么用电子计算呢是什么呀？ 是这个 G 赫兹，光计算什么是 T 赫兹，至少可以9999倍的算力的提升。而光计算在这里面消耗的能源只是一个激光，其他都不需要消耗电的。那么在2021年Nature 的正刊让我提交了一个综述。那么综述呢，综述了 MIT、牛津、名次的还有清华还有 UCL 3种不同的光学方案这3种方案呢各有特长。那么这里面就可以看到，光学有很多性质：干涉、衍射、折射、反射、偏振。那么可以用这种性质呢，来对我们的光计算来打出这么一个脉络。同时，我想举个例子，我们以前的电话用电缆的电话是不能长距离传输的，而且门数是受限的。那么它改变了载体什么呀？从电缆到什么呀？到光了。于是有海底光缆，门数也极大的扩展了。所以说这个呢，计算也应该从电子计算向什么呀？光计算迈进。那么这是国际上呢开展的光计算，那么包括基础材料的研究，推动了基础材料为光计算做服务，研制高速的器件耦合。这是国际上最近这个19242个24最近的国际上的一些贡献，做得非常好泥酸锂的微波、相变材料、光电融合的意志构成。那么这样的呢，都为光计算做了一个铺垫。说国际上呢，在这个光计算上面做了很多的工作。那么中国呢，也在这上面做了很大的一些贡献。第一个是什么呢？是全模拟光电融合，就全模拟的，到电也是模拟的，那么就没有电了，完全是光。第二个呢，做干涉衍射太极的芯片，今年太极芯片已经产生，那么接下来正在做大力的实验，希望这个太极芯片能够用上，它用到了光的2个性质。第3个是呢，全面向的光的训练芯片做出来的，因为训练芯片耗电量很大，说这个东西呢都可以为未来光的计算能够运用到我们的算力网上，做出基础的研究和贡献。那么光计算做完了呢，它可以运用到什么呀？专用的任务端侧智能，还有什么呀？光计算的大模型应用，还能用到无人智能系统等等方面。那么打造什么呀？科学计算的光算力的底座。那么也就是下一代的算力网能不能用光计算来做？那么需要建一个生态，需要大家的支持，共同来解决我们由于大模型用的电子算力的这种能源的消耗能够降低到100万倍以下。那么大家可以想一想，100万倍以下是一个什么数据？那么我的报告就到此，最后谢谢大家
感谢戴琼海院士的精彩报告。下面有请美国前助理国防部长帮办施灿德先生。Thank you very much, Professor Dai Chonghai, for your brilliant presentation. Now let's welcome Mr. Chad Subraja, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense of the United States of America.
Good afternoon. First of all, I must thank the China Association for Military Sciences and the China Institute for International Strategic Studies for the invitation to participate in the leading experts dialogue on AI security. I'll have to caution you that I'm neither leading nor an expert, but I'm glad to participate in this dialogue, and I certainly owe a debt of gratitude to the professor for really an excellent brief. That was fantastic. I think I've just tripled my knowledge of AI just this afternoon. Second, I'll certainly applaud the topic of the panel today and the other panelists, though what I'm going to contribute probably complements the professor's discussion, less on the technology but more on the strategy and policy making side. What I can provide is some contrast to the other experts here and look at AI security through the lens of really an uninformed policymaker or planner. The aim, I think, for me is to diagnose the conditions that I see, provide some prognosis, and offer some potential remedies for the topic of AI security. As for the condition, of course, this topic resides at the nexus of developmental science and strategic policy, which means it's a scholarly and theoretical topic, but also an applied and existing topic. It's still immature, but really already very consequential. Perhaps dangerously so if we don't contemplate the implications together and really kind of find some common ground as AI matures, really at the speed that the professor highlighted. On one hand, I think as evidence, the conversations between researchers and technologists are robust. There's a huge amount of literature and debate and discussion about it. It's impossible to avoid the discussion on the state of AI development in any of the journals of strategic studies or technological advancements, let alone in the halls of capability development within the defense establishments worldwide. On the other hand, the strategic literacy amongst policymakers and strategists on the considerations and implications of AI, particularly AI security, the topic of today, still remains very low. The practical effects of AI on deterrence, on escalation, on security dilemmas, and control are really being led by the fielding of AI technologies rather than the other way around, which is inherently risk-inducing. I have significant concerns, and I think those are shared in other quarters as well. Moreover, even the growing calls for governance or regulatory approaches are going to face resistance, since AI affords really, at times, weaker adversaries or competitors a decisive deterrent advantage as an asymmetric strategy. It should be no surprise that less capable nations may oppose limitations of what is ostensibly an arms control regime, in some cases, that would be negotiated from a position of weakness and cement disadvantages. And that's going to be a concern that we're all going to have to face. The strategic literacy or illiteracy among senior policymakers is due to several factors. One is that discussions are often led by technologists that focus on the scientific competition. Kind of, what's the state of the hardware and the software? And what are those issues? And often this conversation really orbits around the aims to achieve technological superiority of AI development in any form that it takes, rather than what the technology offers or the implications of how it is applied. Another is the propensity to regard AI as kind of a singular, uniform category, rather than as a tool that can be applied to a wide range of applications across different fields, such as security, commerce, research, governance, and others. How both conversations between technical experts on one hand and strategists on the other are manifesting in the real world is mainly at the tactical and operational level, where AI is increasingly used across the full spectrum of security and defense activities, including mobilization and logistics, certainly intelligence collection and analysis, social surveillance, wargaming and systems optimization, and planning, with growing levels of autonomy mixed in. We're all aware in here of the reports of AI-enabled drones informed by AI intelligence and targeting in the conflict in Ukraine, as is the Israeli Defense Forces reportedly using this in Gaza. Certainly, like in the Pentagon, like in many other militaries, this topic is, everybody is frankly working on developing AI for a wide variety of similar activities. But as the technology is already being fielded, AI security governance is only now being formed, and the strategic security considerations remain uncharted. To pilot through this new territory, policymakers are now developing AI governance frameworks as AI capabilities are being already deployed to the battlefield. As an example, the U.S. administration has directed a memorandum on military and intelligence uses of this technology, though the conceptual framing remains immature. On the global front, the United States has worked and is working with other like-minded nations to expand the first ever international agreement on the military use of AI, a non-binding declaration for the second summit on responsible artificial intelligence in the military domain, which I think was completed this week in Seoul. The trend really here is for states to fold AI under existing international law and norms to regulate lethal autonomous weapon systems. Theoretically, this is the simplest approach and really extends legacy obligations on constraint to each nation and really to AI. If AI is a tool, nothing about AI formally or functionally changes the obligations that nations have as domestic practices or under international law. However, existing frameworks may not account for broader considerations and often concentrate only on kinetic applications in defense or security. Non-weaponized AI applications, such as decision support systems, would not necessarily be subjected to the same kind of framework or regulations, and yet they manifest their own unique considerations. One of which the professor highlighted is energy use. Is a tremendous issue that you have to contend with, and by itself wouldn't necessarily fall under agreed to, binding, or otherwise regulatory agreements. While international debates have finally moved beyond kind of lethal autonomous weapon systems for AI, governance frameworks still suffer from a narrow focus on military operations or under humanitarian law, and the strategic implications of AI security remain a critical gap in international discourse and organizational adaptations to AI capabilities and capacities. My point here is that bilateral and multilateral solutions to the implications of AI may reside more at the level of policy than law, and are in urgent need of constructing routinized mechanisms for discourse as a matter of holistic AI security. As for prognosis, if AI security is the process of using AI to enhance any organization's security posture, in this case, states or nations, I'll highlight some areas of AI security that merit greater scrutiny at the strategic level. I'll briefly address three categories that I've observed personally. The first is threat perceptions and deterrence signaling. The second is about warning and incident response. And the third is about control and restraints. First is the impact of AI security in terms of threat perceptions and deterrence signaling. If war is a clash between two hostile and independent wills in a chaotic and rapidly changing environment, the purpose of war is to make the enemy submit to one's will. AI is impacting this premise significantly. It's already difficult to understand how you bend AI's considerations of will when it does not have one independently. It is well established that cognitive AI and other forms of AI-driven technologies have created new ways to influence public opinion and leadership psychology, closely coordinating military, economic, and diplomatic forces with the help of official channels of authorized media and the promotion of mainstream social platform software creates pressures to influence compromise, form psychological deterrence to cause hesitation and concession, change cognition through value identification, differentiation, and achieve preferred ends without conflict. But there are significant AI security risks. One that I concentrate on every day is on how AI is increasingly used to aggregate and assess the extraordinary large volumes of media output to produce trends in popular opinion or even arrive at conclusions of competitors' intent and preferences. My experience is that advantages of large model AI data collection is just simply not capable of revolutionizing propaganda analysis of leadership politics and foreign policy yet, which of course depends on intensive reading of a much more limited base of relevant media sources and official and non-official exchanges. It's not the volume of data that's the problem, in which really AI is now often applied. It is the interpretation, particularly of foreign language material. Of course, AI-informed data aggregation already provides useful assessment of frequency and origins of specific terms and lexicon that provides useful background. But competent analysis still depends heavily on judgment gained from long experience, a persistent observation of issues, a contextual understanding of why issue areas transform, and many other elements that AI has shown to be falling short of, at least for now. In many ways, interpreting signals and messages is getting worse in this case, not better. Poor translations, isolated and otherwise irrelevant comments, and lack of consistency are routinely shaping leadership perspectives based on AI outputs. I can go into some details, examples of how this is impacting real policy decisions later, but the point is that AI-driven collection and assessments are fostering miscalculation and misinterpretation already. As a highly intelligent form of AI, generative AI has the general characteristics of AI cognition, confrontation, and cognitive warfare applications. Reaching an understanding of risks of the effects of generative AI or any AI-informed analysis on perception management may not fall within the emerging constraints of AI governance or even legal obligations, but instead demand policy agreement on how to mitigate the impact through safety valves for threat perception and deterrent signaling. A second area is the impact of AI security in terms of warning and incident response. The impact of AI and indications of warning frameworks, dynamic targeting, and response option formulation in dynamic and rapidly changing crisis situations is highly susceptible to gross miscalculation and rapid escalation. Cognitive overload and automation bias impede careful review of AI outputs and are dependent upon accurate algorithmic designs. Misuse or over-reliance on AI decision support systems, for example, may cause human operators to misidentify or overvalue targets, violate the principle of distinction, or misinterpret actions that lead to accelerated crisis, undermine off-ramping, or intensify conflict termination criteria. A related effect is the first mover advantage, driven by the fragility of decision information systems and dependency upon them. Even under the condition of well-regulated and well-governed human-machine collaboration to mitigate misinterpretation or poor assumptions, the risk of catastrophic collapse will drive each side to move first and faster. In other words, to act preemptively or escalate vertically. Again, this is an area that may fall outside of AI security governance and legal frameworks and may only be resolved through policy interactions and routine exchanges with built-in safety valve mechanisms between humans. The last point, the third point, is the impact of AI security in terms of control. While I've already raised the risk of escalation control, I'll add another feature of AI security that pertains to effective control, ostensibly effective control as a dialectic concept of controlling crisis within the constraints of political objectives while achieving victory will be reshaped by AI security issues. As some PLA strategists recently wrote, the inherent logic of artificial intelligence is algorithms. What they cautioned is to be wary of algorithms that are overly rational in their decisions, which can lead to what they described as ruthless artificial intelligence. Algorithms have a certain degree of autonomy and can perform reasoning operations based on mathematical logic, but are best with the continuous learning of training data sets and the accumulation of practical experience, so they make autonomous judgments and decisions under the conditions of human authorization. But this is extraordinarily hard to model to any level of confidence, in my observation. Yet, even with human-machine collaboration, with a human in the loop overseeing the outcomes, the logic of artificial intelligence is to optimize rather than adhere to political constraints and intent. My caution here is that how human authorization is applied is not only relevant between potential adversaries, but within the decision support system of each side itself, specifically political control systems that are predictable and bear on predictions of behavior in confrontation. Since we're in China, I'll use its own governance as an example and perhaps a model to understand how to merge tools of optimization and political governance. The case is China's adoption and integration of systems concepts, 系统概念, which is really at the heart of governance reform in China for decades, The task of systems theory or systems concepts is not only to understand the characteristics and laws of systems, but more importantly, to use those characteristics and laws to control, manage, transform, or create a system so that its existence and development meet the needs of human purposes. That is to say, the purposes of the system is to adjust the system structure and the relationship of various factors to make the system achieve optimization goals. There's a similarity here between the function of systems concepts and AI and how China has sought to maintain alignment of systems to political prioritization and may provide clues on how to assure AI is controlled. China seems to have found at least a good balance between systems optimization and political governance, and they recognize the dangers and work on this quite often. As for diagnosis, beyond my kind of 3 simple points of perceptions, warning, and control, the emerging challenges of AI security are beyond legal agreements alone. Verification and enforcement problems for any legal framework of AI security merit deeper considerations for policy dialogues and mechanisms to reduce security dilemmas, risks of escalation, and control failure. Here, policy guidance, policy declarations, rules of engagement, codes of conduct play a crucial role in areas where the law is difficult to interpret or apply in relation to AI. Non-legally binding policies also help, perhaps, build consensus on international norms surrounding the development and deployment of military AI in particular. But no one side can achieve that in isolation. Unsurprisingly and somewhat ironically, the way to improve AI security will be through intensified human contacts and exchanges. I'll pause there and we'll move on to the next section. Thank you.
感谢施灿德先生的精彩报告。中外名家对话上半场到此结束，感谢各位报告人和观众。下半场将进行对话研讨，会议将于10分钟后开始，请大家稍事休息。Thank you very much, Chad, for the wonderful speech. This concludes the first half of Leading Experts Dialogue. Great thanks to all the speakers and audience. We will have a panel discussion in the second half of the dialogue in 10 minutes. Now let's take a break.
尊敬的各位来宾，大会将在10分钟后开始，请您尽快就座，并将手机等通讯设备置于静音状态。谢谢合作。Distinguished guests, our conference will start in 10 minutes. Please be seated and mute your mobile phones and other electronic devices. Thank you for your cooperation. 尊敬的来宾，请注意置于座椅上的同传设备。频道1为中文频道，频道2为英语频道。如果同传设备故障，请到位于会场后方的同传设备更换处更换。会议结束后，请将同传设备放置在座椅上。谢谢。Distinguished guests, there are simultaneous interpretation devices on your seats. Channel 1 is for Chinese, and Channel 2 is for English. If you have any problem with the interpretation devices, please ask the staff at the back of the hall for help. At the end of the conference, please leave your interpretation devices on your seats. Thank you very much.
尊敬的各位来宾、女士们、先生们、朋友们，大家下午好。刚才呢，我们解放军新闻传播中心的数字记者木兰率先呢登场，主持了我们这次中外名家对话会上半场的学术活动。我是军事科学院的副院长陈小乾，非常荣幸呢，我来主持下半场的咱们的人工智能的对话。在下半场的学术研讨活动中呢，我们非常荣幸邀请到了4位嘉宾。在此呢，请允许我一一加以介绍。当我介绍到这位来宾的时候，请这位来宾先上台就座。他们是东京大学生产技术研究所特聘教授、日本工程院外籍院士黄。联合国教科文组织人工智能与数据科学促进社会发展教习，荷兰海牙应用科技大学数据科学教授兰普罗斯·斯特利基乌拉斯。刚才给我们做过报告的清华大学信息科学技术学院院长、中国工程院院士戴琼海。美国国防分析研究所研究员、美国前助理国防部长邦拜·施耐德。让我们再次对各位嘉宾的到来表示热烈的欢迎和衷心的感谢。刚才呢，其实2位专家呢给我们做了非常精彩的报告。应该说呢，人工智能是当前最受关注的技术之一。它既给人类带来了重大的发展机遇，但是另外一方面呢，也带来了难以预知的安全风险。实际上，我本人呢，已经前期呢，就是在咱们香山论坛上已经主持过2次这个关于人工智能的对话。但是呢，过去2年呢，都是在平行的会场上。今天呢，我们到这个主会场来主办呢， 说明呢这个大家对人工智能的安全问题更加重视和关注。那么人工智能呢，从它的内部的逻辑来看，它包括算法、算力和数据等等。它的这个内部逻辑和机制呢，具有黑箱的特性，比如说刚才我们戴琼海院士讲到的。那么它的表现行为不可控，决策机制难以解释。而目前呢，这个大模型技术又在快速的发展，其他多条技术路线呢也在不断的演进。刚才呢戴院士也给我们提到了他设计的智能路径和光计算等等的这个方法。但是呢，应该说还有很多的未知的因素，对于治理的敏捷性呢，也提出了更高的要求。可以说，如何在享受人工智能带来的巨大的利润的同时，有效预防和管控它潜在的风险，已经成为人工智能发展面临的关键问题。刚才施灿德先生呢，也提到了他的一些想法和他的观点。那么，只有共商呢，才能共享；只有善治，才能促成善治。人工智能究竟对人类社会发展产生何种作用，取决于国际社会能否趋利避害，开展有效的治理。为此呢，我们中国政府也先后出台了全球人工智能治理倡议，这是2023年发布的，还有呢人工智能全球治理上海宣言2024等重要的文件，充分彰显出中国对人工智能发展、安全和治理的负责任的态度。面对这样一项必将影响人类文明发展轨迹的颠覆性技术，各国应该如何推动研发主体不断地提高人工智能可解释性、可预测性，打造可审核、可监督、可追溯、可信赖的人工智能技术？如何坚持发展和安全并重的原则，不断提升人工智能技术的安全性、可靠性、可控性和公平性？如何加强信息交流和技术合作，共同做好安全风险防范，形成具有广泛共识的人工智能治理框架和标准规范等等，这一系列的问题都非常值得关注，也非常值得我们共同思考。那么围绕这些问题呢，我们将今天呢采取这种对话的方式跟大家呢共同的来探讨。我想呢，首先有请我们东京大学生产技术研究所特聘教授、日本工程院外籍院士胡昂先生发言，大家欢迎。
谢谢主持人，谢谢各位啊，很荣幸能够参加我们香山论坛。我是做城市科学的这个未来城市科学家。大概在20年以前呢，我们开始做城市的大数据的一些研究，包括城市的数理解析。所以严格意义上说，我是一个城市研究领域出身的计算机科学家。所以呢。随着我们技术的这个进步呢和迭代啊，我觉得我们也不得不讨论这个问题。大概在16年的时候，我正好在牛津大学做院士做任教期间啊，日本呢当时推出了这个未来社会5.0啊这样一个建设目标，这是为了应对我们物联网和人工智能的产生，面向未来的一个宏大计划。这个计划呢，应该是在现有的几次产业革命之后的一次新的里程碑。关于未来社会5.0呢，我们一般把它称之为超级智能社会。超级智能社会它除了改善这个人民的福祉这个大家获得更多的幸福感和安全感以外，更多的呢可能是这个在一些这个对和平的向往。对城市的繁荣，对这个国家与国家之间的和平的一个这个愿景和美好的一个祝愿所以从这个角度来说呢，未来社会5.0呢，确实开启了一个就是一个日本的一个面向未来社会、面向未来的一个时代的一个里程碑。关于这个计划呢，我们也做了很多一些这个相关的研究，应该说是。从现在来看呢，它的目标是依托人工智能带来的这种巨大机遇不断的去发展它的潜力，同时呢，去追求人类的福祉追求和平与繁荣，为此而做出贡献。具体来说，我们的领域呢，是一方面深入到医疗一方面是自动驾驶，包括无人驾驶到自动驾驶的这个过程，包括公共的出行的改善，以城市交通问题的治理。 在今年的7月份呢，我也来了北京，参加了我们北京市应勇市长的工作会啊，也是讨论北京大城市交通治理的智能安全的手段，的一些倡议和远景。我们这个闭门会开了4小时45分钟啊，所以说实际上是卓有成效，而且也是务实的。从这个项目的体会呢，我感觉中国啊，我们的中国正在非常负责任地在处理现代科技对于人类的和平以及城市和人类的共同繁荣这件事情，在积极的做出努力，而且这个整体的这个姿态也非常高啊。这个是我的一个切身感受啊。我觉得在人工智能的安全领域呢，最近我也这个考察了我们包括荷兰的松山实验室啊等等，包括吴江训院是他们这个类生安全的一个实验室，有很多体会啊。在这一方面，我们的技术积累和原创的一些科研成果是有非常厚的一个坚实的一个基础啊。从这一点来看呢，确实我们在很多领域已经遥遥领先了啊。比如在日本的话，它现在由于这个或者说整个西方都有一个特点，它的从个人隐私保护到数据安全的这个壁垒比较多啊。相对而言，这个可能在技术进步上面，在技术和这个实物的应用的这个结合上面就显得比较弱一些啊。这个方面我们国内在这个领域是已经可以说是在很多层面是遥遥领先，所以这个也期待着我们更多的这个多边的这个国际组织和科研机构啊，共同这些学者们，大家能够在一个相互尊重的啊、公正的、和平的一个平台上，做更多的交流。我想这也是我个人，包括这次香山论坛的一个主旨。如果说回顾一下人工智能安全上面比较重要的、颇具影响力的事情呢，我觉得就是去年的这个英国的这个布莱切利宣言，我觉得提的这个事情是非常的有里程碑式的意义。第一份人工智能领域的安全的声明啊，这个在去年11月份在英国的这个全球的共同28国家的共同倡议呢，我觉得也是旨在面向未来的这个人工智能的模型的构成对人类的生存威胁的这种担忧等等一系列的担忧啊，大家共同的在讨论。最大的贡献呢，还是希望能够搭建一个具有国际包容性的前沿的人工智能的安全科学研究的网络，以便加深对这个未知的甚至是不能控制的啊，或者说未来也许在某种程度上能够控制的这个人工智能的风险以及它能力的这种理解。我认为这一件事情是我们中国是做出很大的贡献，而且是这个倡议的主要的倡议人啊。我相信在这样一个大的环境和背景之下，大家和平的使用或者说更加的这个以共享和平为前提来共同讨论 AI 的技术应用，我觉得是前景是非常广阔的。我个人也非常期待。谢谢主持人。
感谢黄教授的精彩发言。下面呢，我们有请荷兰海牙应用科技大学数据科学教授兰普罗斯斯特基乌拉斯先生的发言。Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Professor Chen. It's great to have. It's always great to have a live moderator instead of an AI moderator. Although I was very pleased with Moulane, the virtual reporter we had. I am Lampros Tegoulas. I'm a professor of AI and data science in The Hague University in the Netherlands, in Holland. I'm also UNESCO chair in AI for Society. And I would like to give some views about, from the UNESCO perspective on AI security. But first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me. It's really a great privilege, honor, and delight to be here with you today. And big thanks really to the Academy and the Institute for inviting me. And I also appreciate the topic. AI security is so important these days. I was in Shanghai Forum last year. I delivered a speech on AI security, as it were, but it was it was an emerging issue, but a peripheral issue at that time, and I'm really glad to see that it's really a very central issue to the forum today. And I would like actually to pay my dues to my fellow speakers, and I was very impressed by the talks and presentations we had, obviously, and Professor Hu, I really like that you mentioned the Society 5.0. It's really a very important concept, and I will be telling a bit more tomorrow in one of the simultaneous sessions we will have about AI for good. I think Society 5.0 is quite a nice concept. I will be mentioning a bit of that there. And thank you, Professor Dai, by actually giving us a very powerful tour of what's happening in AI today. It was very educational for me. Very compelling, and definitely there are some issues to do AI security relating to the energy that AI consumes, and as part of UNESCO we have already in collaboration with Huawei to deal with green data centers, how to reduce the carbon footprint of AI, really that's important. And of course I really appreciated your points, Chad, and in actually looking at all these very complex issues that the AI applications are raising in the defense area. And I would like to say a few things about the risks as they have been perceived actually in the UN arena in the recent years, and also what we can do to mitigate them. There's a lot of positive impact, a lot of applications of AI, of course, that are very positive, but also, unfortunately, we have some negative impact, and I can give you an example here. It's, if we can have slides, please. Yeah, okay, thank you. We have I have an example from the Netherlands. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this child benefit scandal. It has been a big issue in the Netherlands and Europe in general. It was really a bad application of an algorithm, going really bad, where a biased algorithm, AI algorithm, was used to classify really parents and how they claimed the benefits for their children, and mistakenly labeled 20,000 parents, mostly immigrants, because of the bias in the algorithm, as fraudsters, with terrible consequences, where families were really destroyed, children were removed from families, almost 1,700 children were removed, and most of the children never returned to their families. Some of the parents committed suicide. It was terrible, and actually that was one of the motivations behind the new regulative act in the EU called the AI Act, which is meant to address these issues and promote fairness in AI systems. People can be victims of algorithmic unfairness, and that was a prime example. We have another example, I think Chad also mentioned it, regarding the undermining of our democracy, democratic processes. Sometimes we have AI being used in ways where disinformation campaigns are really developed. I mean, we have social bots that are AI enabled, but also they represent a threat to democracy. Personal data of millions were harvested to orchestrate mass-scale disinformation and voter manipulation in elections, in referendums, etc. So there has been some negative impact on that. And also the advent of generative AI. In the last 2 years, we have seen the cat is out of the box. Whether it is Pandora's box or not, we hope to see. But the emerging technology of AI has a huge transformative potential for society and likely to lead to an unprecedented technological revolution. And I think the pace of this technology developing is quite scary, and I think Professor Dai presented how quickly it can develop, well, we have to see how fast it will go from a kind of low-level primate function to a full kind of human intelligence function, and that's really something that we are all kind of anticipating with a bit of a dread, I would say. Now, in the UNESCO network, we are trying to navigate the boundaries of the synthetic creativity, which is really generative AI and the large language models. I would say a few things here about, first of all, about the opportunities. What is good about generative AI? A lot of things are good, and people are using it already in en masse, I would say. It enhances productivity in many ways, it boosts innovation and creativity, etc. And people have been used in the creative industries and in writing weekly emails and documents and reports, etc. But there are significant risks associated with that. First of all, it's the authenticity of the data. That's a big issue. I mean, more and more, if we have synthetically generated data, will be very difficult to discriminate and to actually confirm the authenticity of this data. The risk of generated data dominating the web is really leading to this loss of memory, collective memory, I mean, which is really a very big threat to our culture. There's the risk of disinformation, of course, fake news, etc. And also that the model architecture is a closed thing. It's not really open, not open to the public, not open to the government. It's kept on servers of private corporations. It's a big issue as well. And of course, the big issue about the data that has been used to train these models, because we don't know exactly what data has been used. There's a lot of privacy and intellectual rights issues there. So there's a lot of risk identified, and I would really emphasize ethical concerns here, bias and discrimination, really dimension, and also misinformation and manipulation. And we need more AI literacy. So the one way to try to mitigate this is actually to increase the capacity at the population in dealing with AI. And there are a lot of risks arising from unintended consequences, like hallucinations of these systems, and even the existential threat of AI, I mean, depending on the velocity that it develops. What we can do to mitigate these risks? Well, first of all, we can deal with it by applying our ethical principles and maybe applying some regulations to comply with the ethics principles of our societies. Really, it's really very promising that there have been already UN resolutions on AI, where actually all the countries in the globe have agreed that this is a major issue and have agreed some common action. The UNESCO framework of AI ethics was one of the first, about 3 years ago, but also we have now AI resolutions this summer, and that's really, really encouraging. Yeah. There have been some initiatives at the national level, if you like. Most of it national. Now we have some international, if you like, initiatives, like UNESCO's initiative, EU's AI for People Commission. OECD also has some AI principles. But in terms of national legislation, we don't have much, apart from the EU. The EU AI Act is probably the first legislation in the world to deal with, as a regulatory step towards AI governance. In China, we have seen the next generation AI development plan, also there have been initiatives by regional authorities in Shanghai, for example. in Shenzhen, so that's important. Also, Hong Kong has recently developed a model, the model personal data protection framework, which was quite important because it gives some practical guidance, and also it's a risk-based approach like the AI Act has been in the EU. So most of this is voluntary regulations at the moment. We don't really have anything legislation apart from the AI Act, which is now voted, but will not go into action for another 1 or 2 years, right? But has been voted through the European Parliament. So you have the recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence by UNESCO that has been voted by all member countries of the UN. That was really a significant step. In the EU, we have the Global AI Framework, which is a predecessor of the AI Act. And these are the main principles of AI ethics. Beneficence, do good, really. Non-maleficence, do no harm. Autonomy, that is that systems, AI systems, should not really gain full autonomy without human supervision. That's really a big risk. Justice, in terms of non-bias and non-discrimination, fairness, and explicability. We need systems that are really interpretable, explicable, and really transparent with human supervision. Really. And the last thing we want to mention, and the last thing we can do to mitigate these risks is openness. To be open, to share, to open up our resources in terms of data, because data is really the fuel, and high quality fuel gives high quality AI, of course. So opening up data, opening up algorithms is very important. We are not there at all. There has been some recent initiatives and some good intentions at the moment at the international stage. We need to do more. This is part also of the Open Solutions agenda of the United Nations, and hopefully some things will be driven at the United Nations level there. It's interesting that actually 120 countries at the moment do not have open data policies, never mind about open algorithms, right? There is a recent report on open data for AI, a guidance really from UNESCO on that. You can check it out. And open government data framework, it's in development. Actually, we try to contribute to that at the UNESCO level. And I think it's important to take action to promote openness. The role of governments is extremely important. International cross-border data flows, data exchanges, and also exchanges on algorithms and information about AI is very important. And I'll stop here, actually, just with these 3 points. Create networks, that's very important. Ecosystems, if you like, to foster the growth of these technologies, but also to work together to be able to govern effectively these technologies. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. 斯特基乌拉斯先生呢，他还有一个身份是咱们联合国教科文组织的人工智能与数据科学促进发展会的教习，所以呢，他给我们介绍了很多联合国以及欧盟等各个组织对于我们这个人工智能的方面的一些倡议，这个呢给我们带来很多的启发。我们再次感谢这个斯特基乌拉斯先生。那么下面呢，我们有请清华大学戴琼海院士发言。
各位好，那么刚才我的报告讲了人工智能技术在算法和这个模型算法和这个算力方面的一个安全问题。其实就像刚才那个谁讲的一样，这个数据的安全变得也是非常重要。那么还有一个层面就是应用的安全，应用的安全是由于技术的安全这个产生的内核产生的，还有一个外在因素会导致这个我们人工智能的安全。在这上面呢，我觉得这个中国呢，包括我们中国政府还有高校、学术界还有产业界都做出了巨大的贡献和努力。我举个例子，我是管理中国人工智能学会的。那么关于中国人工智能 这个安全的问题，我们成立了有伦理专委会，还有治理专委会。这两个专委会呢，每年都有白皮书发。那么最重要就是人工智能保证它的技术安全、它的应用安全这方面的可能性，每年开会都要讨论这方面问题。那么同时我所在的单位清华大学，那么专门有一个治理研究院，人工智能治理研究院。那么这个研究院呢，每年大概要组织数十次的活动，啊，今年在香港也开了会讨论这件事。那么这是我们从小单位来说，从大的来说呢，中国科协，啊，这个万钢主席，啊，在这里面也开了多次会，讨论人工智能治理和伦理方面的安全问题。那么因为中国呢，一直是从我们的理念概念上，一直是治理这个国家国际命运共同体的特点来讨论，说人工智能带来的安全，现在很多方面呢是不可预测，都必须把治理和伦理要走在前面，尤其是它对应用方面的安全的讨论要走在前面。所以说在这里面呢，我们中国人工智能学会和欧洲人工智能学会，2022年还在线上讨论了一次这么一个关于人工智能伦理方面的会议，所以一直希望能够在这个应用层面、技术层面，把人工智能的治理和人工智能的伦理能不能摆在前面来讨论，啊，降低我们人工智能应用的安全风险和我们人工智能技术的安全风险。那么这一点呢，我想今天阐述的这么一个观点。再一个就是特别人工智能应用，啊，这个中国呢，我们这个也强调了 AI 加，就人工智能加。那么最重要是保证中国的这个产业，比如说智能制造啊，人类这个生活，比如智慧城市，还有出行方面智能驾驶、自动驾驶，包括低空经济，为的是就促进我们的就业和中国的这个产业方面技术的发展，能把人工智能应用到我们谋人类福祉的上面来工作。啊，我就强调那么多，谢谢。
戴琼海先生呢，还有一个重要的身份是我们中国人工智能学会的理事长。这个中国人工智能学会呢，是我们目前在国内很有影响的一个一级学会啊。他颁发的吴文俊这个人工智能奖呢，也是我们中国在人工智能里面的最高的奖项。那么他刚才呢，简单的介绍了一下我们关于人工智能安全方面的一些考虑。那么感谢戴琼海先生的精彩发言。下面呢，我们有请美国前助理国防部长邦办施灿德先生发言。
Thank you so much. First of all, it's fascinating to hear the conversation from different perspectives, and I think that's something that I would underscore is too often AI, at least in the world that I work in, it is only a military issue. But the truth is, it's not only a military issue. It has to do with city planning. It has to do with humanitarian issues, social governance issues, commerce, business, manufacturing, and none of those things are exactly alike. So the concern I have is as we see nations reaching out, which I appreciate, to develop frameworks and regulatory agreements, is that they're going to fall into the trap of only thinking of it as a security issue. And not everything falls under just security. And there's other impacts of AI oversight, AI security, that is not exclusively limited to the defense or security realm itself. And so I think that's important. I appreciate the examples, particularly the EU and what they've done in this direction. But I'd also highlight is that there's also limits to any kind of regulatory framework, binding or legal or otherwise. There's unique facets about AI issues where verification and enforcement of any agreements is really problematic. Of what you say that you're going to do and what you can do, and then how you build really respect and trust amongst signatories on achieving those conditions in some kind of way where it doesn't lead to either escalation or preemption or cheating, frankly. And I don't know another way other than that you're going to have an aspect of these arrangements being policy level dialogues and other confidence building measures, constant reinforcement and dialogue that complements any kind of binding arrangements that you reach. You're really going to have those because it's too easy to cheat, and it's perhaps too uncontrollable to understand what the impacts are either domestically on your own governance structure or externally in terms of threat perception issues. So I won't cover that territory too much anymore, but I do know that as I discussed this with colleagues in the United States and our partners and allies, is there is this unique facet that does separate it. While there's similarities with other, in this case, security or arms control regimes, there's a distinct quality about it that separates it from that too, and that's this verification proof. I can't count AI. I can't do a site visit of an AI. There's really troubling aspects to that, but I think that's something we're going to have to think through. And I'll pause there.
感谢施灿德先生。这个刚才呢，在他的这个前面的这个报告的基础上呢，又补充了他关于这个人工智能安全的问题，特别是反复强调呢，其实人工智能不仅仅是一个国防的问题，可能也是牵涉到这个人类生活的方方面面，这个也是非常值得大家一起来思考的。那么，我们再次感谢施灿德先生的精彩发言。下面呢，因为4位嘉宾呢都做了一个这个开场白啊，我们现在呢主要进入下一个环节，就是现场的互动环节。这个我想呢，今天呢，因为看来这个咱们这个来的人啊非常多，也反映了大家对人工智能安全的这个高度的关注。我想呢，就是这个下面呢，我们举手发言，在发言之前呢，请简单的自报家门，介绍一下自己的情况，然后呢，这个提问呢尽可能的简单。下面有没有人主动提发言？
各位专家，你们好。我是来自军事科学院的邝文俊。因为在场有很多外宾，所以我用英语提问。It's very nice to hear that all you guys are talking about the artificial intelligence. I'm learning quantum mechanics. I'm doing quantum technology, so it's fascinating to hear different point of view or the other part of the science. And I also think about the artificial intelligence, especially about the cognitive artificial intelligence, just what Professor Dai just mentioned in his talk. So my big concern is that if our AI become very smart, develop the cognitive AI, then can we still trust the AI? This is one question. The second question is if now we are working very hard to make the regulations to regulate the AI development, but then the AI we're trying to regulate is evolving very fast. Is that now we are a little bit ahead maybe in the regulation, but whether there is a concern that in the near future we cannot control this, I would say, monster, they are growing so fast that no human efforts can make any effective measures to control it. What do you think about that? Thank you.
提了2个非常尖锐的问题啊，这个我们4位嘉宾有谁愿意主动？我们请我们胡院士。
我先回答第一个问题哈，争取能回答您的第一个问题。我觉得这个问题很好。关于黑盒是否可信的问题，这也是我们学术界现在在各个领域讨论的比较多的问题。从黑盒到可信，这是一个很漫长的过程，至少我个人是这么看待的。短时间不能完全信任，这一点非常困难。其实从这一点也是造成了人工智能的安全的，我觉得最终极的问题啊。如果说安全有不同的等级的话，这是最后一个等级，最高的层级，就是关于人工智能的可信度的问题。因为其实 AI 有一个很大的缺点啊，在我今年的公开演讲里边我也多次提到 ，AI 缺乏不确定性啊，缺乏量化不确定性，并对此进行干预的能力。就是 AI 是一个，就目前我们的 AI 的发展水平来说啊，也许将持续很长一段时间。AI 对自己的回答的问题并不确定啊，比如说你问他日本的首相是谁，他可以回答很精确，因为他的信息来源很多。但是你问他某一个非洲的这个国家领导人是谁，他就第一次能回答，第二次就开始加各种定语，开始加各种，就是我们用中文讲叫闪烁其词啊，就开始自己给自己摘掉啊，慢慢的使自己好像没有那么不会给你一个绝对值，他开始慢慢的模糊这个绝对值的可信度。这件事情是包括最近一个很大的一个讨论，是关于 AI 的不同的模型的这个人格的问题啊，他们开始有不同的性格，有些人很尖锐，有些人跟你对着干，有些人一直讨好你。如果一直讨好你，他可能会给你一个你很想知道的结果，那这个结果并不见得代表它是准确的，这一点是非常大的一个问题。其实我觉得所有的 AI 的问题，当然人的脑科学研究啊，我们都是只是略懂啊，略微知道一些，非常神奇的一个结构。就人脑的这个决策，包括我们说的今天戴院士讲的这个小算力可以做这么精确的这个问题反馈或者决策的话，觉得这是一种非常高级的智能。人脑在人体里只占2%，但是我们要消耗20%的能量，就人体而言，那绝对不是一个简单的存在的一个器官的问题，它真的是我们的中枢，是我们的最重要的一个决策机构。它用2%的这个体积消耗了你20%的能量，你可以知道它是一个高度虽然是小模型，它是高度的集中的一个算力啊。所以从这一点来说，人的脑科学研究，我觉得被模拟、被学习、被深度学习的可能性都很大，但是要被短时间内完全取代人类决策，我觉得是做不到的。最好的办法是人为干预和监管，但这样肯定会放弃一定的效率，但是呢，会保证你决策的科学性。因为人这件事情之所以能够我们有限的认知啊，这么长的历史，那一定它有它的存在的道理。人脑是不可替代的啊！我是今年我的很多场演讲都是提 AI 与人类共生，我觉得这一点很重要。这个视角可能将很长一段时间伴随着我们从这个黑盒走向可信这个过程，完全去倾斜性的，就是说不计成本和原则的去信赖 AI 是非常危险的一件事情啊！这是我想回答你的第一个问题。我想第二个问题交给几位专家回答可更合适，谢谢。
第二个问题是关于由于人工智能发展的非常的快，我们人类能否控制得住？
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge we have. The problem of the velocity, really. You mentioned that regulation is picking up. We are a bit ahead. I don't think it's ahead. We are ahead, but we have a big challenge in front of us. And the velocity, the speed with which this AI revolution is developing is really unmanageable. I mean, it looks unmanageable, and we need to speed up, and we need to do better in terms of regulatory agility, I think. But it's a big problem, and the only thing that will help there probably is teaming up with having global alliances in AI. It seems that a lot of people now have taken the initiative in a lot of countries. Hopefully some international really action will be taken. But we need to speed up these regulatory actions, definitely. And it is scary, and actually if you're in the bubble of academics and researchers and experts in AI, they will tell you this is not really just a compelling technology and very rapidly developing, but also quite dangerous sometimes. And we have examples, and also Professor Hu really has given some good examples of why not to trust it, and not when it develops at a level that Professor Dai suggested maybe happen in the near future, but also today we have examples like the Netherlands child benefit scandal, and it's actually about lacking effective human oversight. Human oversight is very important. We cannot trust human operators with absolute decision power, right? We don't always trust them, so why should we trust systems blindly? Yeah, I mean, I think the element of human oversight is important, and transparency, and going from the black box to trustworthiness is very important, as you said. And just a final remark, I think maybe the solution lies in this human and policy agreements and governance agreements that we all abide to, and it was really something that Chad mentioned that struck me, that system optimization, for example in China, that has been quite effective in that, it really has to go together. To be successful, it needs really a policy governance, and if you don't have human-driven policy government, then you cannot be successful in optimizing and actually running safe and effective systems. That's I'll stop here, really. Yeah.
Please.
Thank you so much. I am Jalal Raza from Pakistan. I recently had a look on the book which has been written by Mr. Kurzweil, The Singularity is Near, when human beings and machines will become one. I don't know what is your view on it. I still think that human beings are much better than the machines now, and shall stay better than the machines. Number one, this. Number two, there have been some talk that AI may develop sentiments and then take its own decisions. Is it possible?
It's a very hard philosophical issue you are raising. That's a philosophical issue, really. And the singularity threat from AI has been there. A lot of experts, not just Kurzweil, has been, and actually it is a real worry. And talking to academics and researchers from the big corporations also that develop these AI systems, you can talk to them and see how worried they are, and that some things are developing so fast, and that's the real worry, that we might really go to the point of no return very quickly. And how do you regulate it? How do we slow these things down sometimes in order to be able to have a peek in and see what's happening in the black box of AI development, really? That might help. But it is a worry. It is quite scary, I would say. And as to the possibility of machines developing conscience of their own, consciousness. You talk about consciousness, really. Yeah, that's another kind of big open question, and don't think a lot of people have a definite answer on that, but it's quite a philosophical problem. But it doesn't mean that it's not near or it's not real.
So I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
这个问题是10年前就有人讨论过，啊，这个问题就他能不能做决策？那么实际上这个从一个刚才我非常赞同他说是一个比较高的哲学问题，它实际上从这个我们这个决策来说，它最重要还是一个意识问题，能不能达到这个意识层面，有这个意识去想这个逻辑问题。现在我们说往上发展，第一层面是脑科学，第二个层面就是脑意识，意识。所以能到意识层面的问题，它就能做决策。那这个问题呢，目前来看，如果能使得 AI 做决策，最重要是这个几个方面。第一个，数据方面的问题，数据；第二个呢，就启动这个 AI 算法模型的问题，架构。现在的模型架构呢，基本上还是全是包括架构。如果让这种架构下让它做决策，那还是蛮难的一件事情。但是也可能一夜之间，未来就能做到这样的事情。所以这个人工的发展啊，是说飞速呢，它还有起点性，奇怪的起点性。到了这个起点，马上瞬间就发生变化，所以说大家不好猜，也不好弄。所以我们在开这个会议的时候，这个伦理会和治理会啊，我们一直都落后于技术的发展。你讨论一个白皮书，技术又出来了，对吧？ChatGPT 我们弄完了，白皮书弄完了以后，纹身图出来了 ，AIGC 出来了，纹身师又出来了，你这个还在往下走。你看这2年发展多快，未来3年人工的发展可能就要走入快车道。所以这个方面的问题也不好说哪个时间点能够做到这一点。也是 open problem。好，谢谢。
Thank you. I'm Praveen Sani from India. My question is, a lot of experts today say, in fact, Eric Schmidt is in the lead. They are talking about AI agents coming in a year or two. In fact, he says by next year, AI agents will be there and they'll be able to do the reasoning by themselves and autonomously do the task which is assigned to them. My question is that when we have a problem of contextualization, which is the black box problem, how exactly can an AI agent reason without contextualization? That's my question. Thank you.
就是 AI 怎么样做理智的推理问题。从现在这个大模型，我刚才做报告就讲了，这个深度网络它就不可解释，这个就是没有因果关系。说它推理推过去的时候，能够推理推过去，最重要是由数据决定。这个数据呢，你比如说我刚才举例子 ，AI for Science 科学，因为科学家们的数据都很完整。也很整齐，洗得也非常干净。他是物理学家，他就把物理的数据洗得很干净这个方向，然后把物理数据弄进去以后，他就能够解决以前物理讨论不出来的原理，他解决了。这个第一就是数据的问题。那么从我们现在来看，如果要想做这个深度网络的大模型，最重要的一个特点是什么？不可解释，就不能解释它为什么这么做。因此，它带来的潜在的风险就非常的大，所以它的推理决策的能力是靠数据和模型加算力解决的，但推理出的结果，它不一定是你要的结果，就刚才我们说这个胡教授所说的，你要你的结果也可以，那你为了数据不一样，他一直都听你的话，一直听你的话，这是由数据来决定。我大概说这么多，谢谢。
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you very much for the interesting discussion. Anastas Vangeli, University of Ljubljana, Slovenia. I have a rather short question going back to the role of human intelligence in all this, and that is, how does geopolitics and geopolitical tensions contribute or don't contribute to AI security and the quest for regulation? I mean, we have seen all these AI regulation acts, but they concern national jurisdictions, or in the case of the EU itself. But from my understanding, we need a global dialogue on that, and whether we are to a point where this is conducive or not in the near future. Thank you very much.
这个问题非常的现实，我觉得这个必须要由我们联合国是不是来有一个态度，叫我们。
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. It is really a big question hovering at the moment for representatives of many countries and in the UN, as you say. I think we have, as I said, we have some encouraging kind of developments in the recent years, in the last 3 years. We have the UNESCO ethics, AI ethics framework ratified by all countries. We had in this summer we had 2 UN resolutions actually that has been really supported by all countries in the end, more or less. And I mean, the first resolution was more general. Now we have a more, I mean, driven by China. I think that was the last resolution is very more concrete and actually is more promising in terms of dealing with the inequalities and the digital divide, the AI divide, I would call it, the AI divide, because we have different speeds of AI development around the world. Of course, we have, I mean, the main developments are driven by the big platforms in the Western countries at the moment, and that's a big contrast to what's happening in the global South, right? And of course, because people are, you know, nations are in different situations, there is a big difference of what each one needs in terms of the AI sphere, right? Some people need more regulation, they need to understand more things more because things are galloping too fast. And some other nations really need to get the basic tools to have some first benefits out of AI because they have none, right? So it's difficult to have a consensus of all this, but things are moving in the right direction, the UN at least, and we have appreciation of the needs of especially the global South and the less developed countries by everyone. And I think, as you said, probably the holy grail here is to have global regulation, and in my view, it's really something that's not out of grasp, because, of course, there are differences in ethics and perceptions of human rights in societies. Maybe subtle difference, there are some differences, but still, this has not been a barrier. I mean, a lot of this, people have appreciated that there are some definitely common ethical values for everyone. And the UNESCO framework really focuses on that and really demonstrates that. And I think this common ground can take us quite far, hopefully, and have a global regulatory framework, some global standards to do with AI governance, if not for AI development, because also it's not just about the governments, it's about how to develop AI more effectively, more appropriately for the benefit of societies. And that's also a big question. It's not just about governing AI. As Chad mentioned this point before. I think we can do it. I mean, the way EU moved quite quickly because of the issues, some problems we had in terms of bad use of algorithms, for example, moved in this direction very quickly, and we have an AI Act, which is now in legislation. That shows an example that multinational cooperation and consensus can be achieved. Yeah. So I'm optimistic. At least that's what I can say. Yeah. Thank you.
先生也有话要说。
Real brief, I think that's excellent. I don't often praise China, but I'll at least say something nice about China today and about this issue is, if you read the writings of the PLA, is that every single time that they're talking about AI, and certainly they're heavily invested in the information domain and where that's going and future technologies as an exploration of future warfighting forms and modes, is that in every case they talked about human-machine collaboration as a way of ensuring that there's a human in the loop over AI to control both inputs and outputs, but ideally is to ensure that AI stays on track with where the human intent is. And there's multiple reasons why I think that they do that, but I think that's praiseworthy, and I think that that's an important model for everybody to follow, and I'm not sure everybody else will. I think that also is a good signal that may mean that China might be more forward-leaning in international or even bilateral, multilateral or bilateral arrangements, binding or non-binding, perhaps even policy arrangements, to help mitigate from the worst effects of haywire AI or uncontrolled AI. I think that there's a good positive aspect here and frankly some lessons to be learned from China and how they're addressing some of these issues, at least theoretically.
谢谢施灿德先生的这个评价。我想我们一定要给我们这位女士一个机会，就是 the lady first. OK.
Thank you so much. I'm Maria Sultan from Pakistan, South Asian Strategic Stability Institute University. I have two quick questions. One from the gentleman from UNESCO. You've talked about the regulations, that's brilliant, and also about the global governance structure. But the question is that there is a glass ceiling when we talk about the global south, and that is with regards to access to technology, access for the students to go there, and most importantly, how would you mitigate a threat when you don't even understand its dimensions? And that's most of the world where the global south resides. So what is UNESCO actually doing to make this a more even platform in terms of access to technology and benefits to the people who would be perhaps looking at this much more constructively? And for my American and Chinese colleagues, the question is, we have talked about governance, we've talked about ethics, we've talked about everything else, but how do you see the military application of AI, particularly in South China Sea, and what if it participates or precipitates a far bigger crisis than what we had been anticipating? At what level and at what level of conflict dynamics you would think that it could create a situation much and far beyond what we understand in terms of war and its manifestations?
I can take the first question, I think. Well, thank you for the question. It's it is one very important aspect of AI development, the equity and, if you like, the fairness in what we do with AI. And of course, as I said, there is the AI divide, and actually this divide is in different levels. In small communities, for example, you have parts of communities that, because of because of age or because of some people do not have the same abilities to benefit from AI or to benefit from digital technologies in general, which is really the wider issue here. And if you take this to the global level, then we have the issue of some countries not being able to benefit so much of these technologies, although these technologies have been really rapidly developed in other countries with a lot of benefits, a lot of applications, etc. And what do we do about this? Because it is a big it is unfair, it is a big injustice, if you like. This has been realized, of course, at the United Nations level. There have been a lot of resolutions really about this. The last UN resolution about AI is really addressing this more concretely. So in the 29th General Assembly of the UN, I think the resolution on AI is focusing specifically on the issue of injustice for the Global South, and the proposal is really to accelerate capacity building and to take concrete steps and actions to enable these countries to develop capacity that is needed in terms of human resource, in terms of education, as you said, but also in terms of technological means, to be able to come to a level where they also benefit their populations. So in some societies, really, AI is not kind of it's not presenting a lot of risks because of the low application, the low level of application, and we need to get these countries also to similar level if we can. But capacity building is the key word here, and this is the main focus of the action at the UN level. And how to do that? Well, countries that are very capable in terms of AI development, like Western countries like China, they need to do more and to provide more assistance and support to the Global South, not only in terms of financial means, but also in terms of knowledge transfer, in terms of creating business environments, creating ecosystems. As I said, ecosystems is a key word, and we need alliances and ecosystems at the global level, multilateral alliances to do that. Okay? And yeah, regarding the applications in the military, I think, yeah, from the chat, Professor Dai will but it is a great concern also in the UNESCO level. I mean, applications of AI, the military, especially to do with autonomous weapons or killing robots, as we call them. They're really a big threat, and I have to say that in China there have been quite a lot of voices that are actually mentioning and really trying to raise this issue of autonomous weapons. Yeah. But, maybe Professor Dai say a few more here. Points. Thank you.
Okay. 非常感谢4位专家的精彩报告。我是来自军事科学院的球迷，我想请教施三德先生一个问题。我记得基辛格博士生前给人类发出的最后一个警告，就是关于人工智能的。基辛格博士认为，人工智能给我们人类带来的安全挑战，甚至比核武器更严重。我想请教施三德先生，您作为一个美国人，您是怎么理解基辛格博士的警告？美国政府和美国军方在管控人工智能的安全风险方面有些什么打算和动作？能否给我们做一个介绍？谢谢。
That's a great question. You know, I have not read. I know Dr. Kissinger co-authored a book about this very topic, which I, in full disclosure, have not read. But I do know that, at least I suspect, that some of the issues that I already raised, which is when you talk about a tool or an instrument that has a high capacity to act in a lethal manner, or at least support lethal activity, is that what makes AI unique, and in some ways, cyber shares the same kind of an issue, but AI is a little bit different, is this is a really tough area to develop arms control regimes or limitations or regulatory processes to enhance mutual trust between two sides, to manage escalation, to ensure that inadvertent misinterpretations or misunderstandings don't lead to inadvertent crisis. And I suspect a lot of what he's talking about is that the verification and enforcement of verification regimes, no matter how they're negotiated, are going to be almost impossible to develop. And that's going to take a different kind of a mechanism to do so. I know in some ways, at least in part, is that the way you're going to have to, as I think I closed my opening presentation on, is there's almost a kind of comical or ironical outcome of these conditions, which is it might engender actually more human-to-human contacts and exchanges as a means of helping mitigate against the risks of what AI brings to the environment in the future. We'll see, though.
好，这位。你好，我叫胡泽，来自中国海军外事局。我有一个关于时政性的问题，是想问这个 Sturujila 教授和施坦德帮办的。我想这也是在座的各位可能都比较关注的一个问题，是关于人工智能和政治选举的。我们都注意到，在2022年的时候，联合国教科文组织发布了一份指南，是这个叫做数字时代的政治选举 ，Elections in Digital Time。我想问一下，就是2年过去了，在这方面，就是教科文组织有没有什么新的趋势，或者是正面、负面的这个跟踪性的影响可以分享给我们？那再聚焦一下，就是说，请问这个施赞德帮办，您如何看待政治选举中的这个人工智能在本次，也就是2024年的政治选举，在这个前总统特朗普和现副总统哈里斯之间的这个竞选中的作用？谢谢。
Thank you so much for the question. It's a great question about AI eroding our democratic processes. It has happened. There are examples of that, as I mentioned. Yeah, UNESCO has issued a guideline on how not to be affected by this, how to mitigate the effects of mal-use of malicious use of information, data, and algorithms. Really, has it had a big impact? I'm not sure. I mean, we have not really moved on much in the last 2 years than we have been recently in the last 10 years, what we have seen in the last 10 years. But definitely we are a bit more wiser, hopefully, and this guideline will help also the governments to do more. But in order for the guideline to be effective, of course, governments will need to adopt it and to take action based on the guidelines. And we have not seen much of that, I think. That's my impression. And we need to see more action taken by the governments really to defend their democratic processes more, really, in that area. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Very briefly, again, it's not my area of expertise at all. I think, like most Americans, we're very hopeful that any intelligence shows up in any of our elections. But I think you can say with a high degree of confidence is that the impact of AI in terms of what it is projecting onto democratic election processes is we're still in the embryonic stage of that. It has the potential to get much, much worse than it is now. And where I do have a little bit better insights is for anybody that works in the intelligence community, already it's amazing how much the intelligence services around the world are investing in trying to track down and correct false reporting or malinformation that's generated through AI. And that's already having an effect that you have to address those things. They're extraordinarily powerful. They're often so counter to what the conventional understanding is that it compels you to invest that time to do so. And if you can understand how you would magnify that across an entire society, there's a kind of coming problem with that we're going to have to resolve at some point. My solution is turn the computer off, but I can afford to do that, so we'll see what the other better solutions are.
I would say this is the quest for the truth, really. And it will transform what intelligence services are doing. It will transform what human journalists will be doing to actually verify facts as false or true, and it will be more and more difficult because of the false or the fake news and everything. Yeah.
好，请把话筒给他。
感谢主持人，我有2个问题。第一个问题是提给乌拉斯先生，就是人工技术发展的非常迅速，但是人工智能技术的这个竞争也非常激烈。我想请问，以联合国的角度，当前这个世界国际社会，尤其是几个人工智能技术发展比较快的地区和组织，应该如何平衡这个人工智能技术竞争和合作的关系？第二个，我想请问一下斯坦德先生。就是人工智能技术在这个军事领域的应用呢，确实也是越来越广泛了。应该如何？但是呢，由于人工智能不确定性也带来了很多的这种危害。我想请问施坦德先生的是，如何在这个人工智能在军事领域的应用中呢，如何平衡AI 对武器效能的提升以及其带来的这个负面影响？谢谢。
第一个问题是不是还是请我们这个
Thank you so much for the question. I think the first leg of the question, which is about AI being rapidly developed at the moment, but pushed forward by the big platforms mainly, the quite big companies, corporations. It is an issue. It has been, and regulation has not been able to do much there. And actually, whatever regulation has been applied or is working so far, at least, it is because it has been either proposed or adopted by these big business players, really. Because the governments have been a bit slow in really producing any regulation, never mind actually operationalizing or actually applying. But there is some regulation that comes from the industry at the moment in AI, and of course it is really driven by the big business players, and they're quite powerful in the area of AI. And the governments need to do a bit better in regulating the market, not just the AI, but also the AI market, I would say. And that's really another and very nice point to raise here. Okay. Now, in terms of the uneven playground and the inequalities, we had this discussion a bit earlier, but also I would say this: if we have a level playing field for everyone, that would help. And this is also a very important point of the last UN resolution in 29th General Assembly in July. The AI resolution really mentions this point about empowering all countries, especially developing countries in the global south, to do more, to build more capacity to do with AI development, but also to achieve a level, kind of fair environment for doing business for everyone, so nobody can be left behind. Really, that's that's really at least stated. Now it is really articulated in concrete terms in a UN resolution, and that's, to me, that's some progress there.
Yeah, again, great question. A little bit difficult to answer. Certainly, I think you raised an interesting point, which is efficiency, right? Which is the efficacy that you apply anything on AI towards. You know, the likelihood is that it's going to lead to greater efficiency, but there's also a downside to that, which I raised and has been raised already here on this panel, is there's an optimization quality about it that's interesting, and there's risk in that, right? Which is things will I'll, again, using an example in China, is AI doesn't need socialism with Chinese characteristics, right? Somebody has to make sure that your AI follows the tenets and principles and priorities of socialism with Chinese characteristics, or using an American example, the same thing. Somebody's got to be there doing that, and the risk is if you don't have good oversight mechanisms, or you don't have good control, human-machine collaboration, as we talk about, there's a risk that it'll optimize out of those things on a path that you don't want it to be. So whatever trust mechanisms that you have built into it, or whatever performance characteristics you have, is just somebody's got to be in that loop watching that. The one other risk I've raised, there's a million of them, but and this is the issue about who has what, and the global divide between the North and South is, I wonder in certain AI areas, particularly in the military realm, that if you have superiority in that area, it might be an absolute advantage. Meaning there's not a first place, second place, third place. It might be first place and everybody else is in no place, right? And that raises really interesting issues of security dilemmas that get manufactured from that, how you react to escalation, how it might drive first mover preemption because of that condition. You know, that we've faced those kind of conditions in the past, but I think that one's a particularly interesting one. Is if my AI is better than all of these other nations' AI, and it's an absolute superiority, meaning I win in every condition, then that is something we might have to talk through a little bit more.
因为时间关系啊，我想是不是最后一个问题？还有。最后一个问题就请胡院士你给我们讲一讲北京市市长应勇，请你去给北京市规划了这人工智能4个小时45分钟，你就讲4分钟就行了，给我们大伙儿讲一讲北京市的这个人工智能，给我们剧透，谢谢。
感谢您的问题哈，这个问题实际上倒不涉及到太多敏感信息啊。没有我们今天会议本身能级那么高啊，它实际上就是一个市长工作会，讨论北京的大城市的交通拥堵和社会治理的一些问题。其实中间有很多关于数据的使用和未来怎么样科技向善的问题。我想借您的问题，因为您给我机会发言了嘛，我还是想表达一下对刚才几位老师的这个观点的赞同啊，我特别欣赏我们联合国这位教授的他的这个科技公平、科技向善的这样的一个大的一个初衷，我觉得这个在学术界是有广泛认同的，我觉得这也是我们共同的目标。AI 的应用呢，一定要往集体层面去思考，任何一个新技术的使用，不能去单一的看它，完成一种非常开始的时候就把它提得过于个性化。这个一会儿我会回到我的一个问题啊。如果个性化的需求太高，社会很难，这个系统很难满足。所以开始的时候，我们的科技向善一定要在集体层面去思考。比如说自动驾驶这件事情，我们曾经在一个论坛上，我跟一个专家就为这个问题我们争论起来。他的目标是他要寻求的一种惬意的生活。如果北京市街上都是自动驾驶汽车，他就要找一辆车，然后 长途奔袭3个小时去大兴，还要一个人独享这个3个小时。我说你是一种公共资源的浪费，就你这种人不适合在，也没有资格生活在北京这样的超级大城市。因为大城市的生活一定是有阵痛的，你也得付出代价，但它也给了你相应的机会，这就是大城市。如果每个参与者没有公民意识，我觉得是很可怕的，啊，这个叫过度侵占公民资源和公共性资源。所以我就回到了刚才那个问题，就是说科技向善要从集体层面去思考，同时要做更多的满足共性的一些需求的思考。啊，关于北京的这个事情呢，目前还在讨论中，但是我们在积极的在做一些工作，包括我们在应用阶段，比如说，当然这个可能跟 AI 不是特别关系紧密，比如说这个就是我们叫 MaaS 啊，出行即服务，包括北京的公共交通改善是基于 TOD 加 MaaS 这种系统，这个正好是在向东京在学习和借鉴。我本人也在这个领域做了很长时间的研究，就是如何在传统的交通领域的升级迭代的时候，用 AI 和智能控制的智能交通的手段去优化它。包括北京现在也有碳普惠、碳积分的平台，就是那个 MaaS 应用系统，也有200多万注册用户。啊，北京市的教研院一直在推这个工作，北京市教委在推这个相关的工作。我相信，我也很期待啊，这一天能够改善北京交通这一天迅速到来啊！那天殷市长说：“这个是不是你不选择到北京生活的原因？”我说：“我主要是怕堵车。”这个确实是一个非常现实的问题。交通的拥堵会减少城市的这个竞争力，会让大家选择这个更宜居的、更有获得感的城市。这个确实是一个很现实的问题啊！谢谢您的问题，谢谢。
因为时间关系啊，这个今天的对话呢，就是暂时到这儿。这个4位嘉宾呢，给了我们非常精彩的发言，围绕着人工智能的安全、发展、治理还有伦理等等问题呢，这个给了非常精彩的报告，而且回答了大家的问题。这个我呢这儿做一个简单的小结，也发表一个我个人的一个观点。刚才呢在会前呢，我跟我们来自荷兰的这个联合国的我们的斯塔基莫拉斯先生做了交流，他呢是来自希腊啊。这个希腊呢，刚才他的报告里面呢也提到了这个一个希腊的这个神话，就是潘多拉的盒子。他说呢，人工智能是不是打开了潘多拉的盒子？那么潘多拉的盒子呢，我们都知道，它在打开的时候，它放出了衰老、疾病、邪恶等等，但是呢，它恰恰是把这个希望关在了盒子里面。那么我想呢，在最后呢，我刚才一直在想，我们中国呢有一个类似的神话，叫大禹治水啊，我们所有的中国人都知道这个故事。这个大禹的父亲用堵的办法来堵这个洪水，结果呢没有成功，而大禹呢用疏导的办法，让这个水的治理呢成功了。那么人工智能是不是人类面临的一次洪水？那么这个洪水呢，它在带来了这个灌溉、带来了便利的同时，它一定也会带来负面的效应。那么我们人类怎么共同的来面对人工智能的这个问题？怎么样治理这个洪水？用好它的有利的一面，而防止它不利的那一面。这个我相信呢，我们几千年的我们的祖先有这样的智慧，我们今天我们的人类一定有更好的办法，更加智慧的措施，我们有更好的框架、更好的法规、更好的治理体系，来完善我们人工智能的安全问题。这个呢，我想呢，今天的这个对话虽然时间很短，但是我们提出了很多的问题，有哲学层面的，有现实层面的，有技术层面的。这些问题呢，也留给我们在座的各位听众，我们各位嘉宾继续去思考。我想呢，今天我们的对话就到这儿为止。感谢各位嘉宾，感谢各位来宾，谢谢大家。
朋友都知道我是很挑剔的。防晒乳我选 KS 皇家呵护抗光清爽高防晒凝露，因为它有媲美蓝光神盾的抓藻植萃，保护我在阳光下延缓肌肤老化，维持青春弹力。可以防御工作环境里的3C 商品，各种光源对肌肤的伤害，擦起来清爽不黏腻。我特别喜欢它做到海洋友善，365天，天天抗光抗老化，是我的保养日常。你呢？呵护您，呵护全家人，专属你的 KS Royal Care 抗光清爽高防晒凝露。